Naruto x Lotm, A Fool's Errand. By author, Hoin_Kyoma. Chapter 81-107. The insects left everyone in the area in a state of shock and confusion, bringing them all to a sudden pause, be it the ink animals or Tsunade, Hiruzen and Yamato. The pause didn't last long since they all acted almost on instinct when they saw the sudden insect cloud that had emerged out of the shinobi dive towards Tachibana as the insects decided he was the one that posed the most danger to their host. Sasuke immediately weaved hand signs for the fireball jutsu since he already knew that the shinobi was possibly an Aburame. Sakura flicked kunai with explosive tags away from the area while Naruto performed the hand signs of the Great Breakthrough Jutsu to empower Sasuke's fireball. Among the adults, Yamato was the first to react since he created several clones and they began to follow the larger ink creatures that were rushing away since they'd been caught. Tsunade also acted by signaling Hiruzen to follow the ink creatures, but Sai was clever and instantly sent most of them away in different directions so that they couldn't be traced back to him. Yamato at that moment finally noticed Tsunade, who had lost control over her chakra suppression technique for a second when she realized that the ones attacking and conducting the trafficking ring were Konoha's own people, and he flickered towards her position. A large fireball escaped Sasuke's lips, only amplified by Naruto's Great Breakthrough Jutsu, and engulfed the swarm of insects that was about to horde around Tachibana and suck him until his blood was dry. Tachibana teleported away with the help of the explosive tags that Sakura had flicked away from the swarm. They were his special explosive tags which he had given each team member for a just-in-case scenario where they would have to perform a coordinated attack, or in this case, a retreat. Tsunade's eyes were still narrowed in on the Aburame shinobi under the swarm of insects, but she quickly looked at Yamato, who was looking at her with a little bit of guilt. Tsunade had a lot of questions for the man in front of her, but she held back. Instead, she simply told Yamato, "I won't interfere in the mission. We can talk when you are resting. I will find you." Yamato was a little surprised. "How will you find me?" Yamato didn't want to brag, but he was a pretty decent jonin by any standards, and he was confident in his ability to evade detection as long as he wanted. Even though two people had followed him without it ever coming to his notice while on this mission. Tsunade said nothing, and just as the silence was about to get awkward, a simple bulge appeared from inside his collar, and much to his surprise a slug climbed out of it. "Ekkk. I will make sure to keep an eye on him, Tsunade-sama." Yamato almost screamed when he saw the slug that was in his dress and nearly slipped from the tree and fell down because he suddenly lost control over his chakra due to the surprise. He hadn't realized in any world or time that there was a speaking slug attached to his body. "Oh, how did she get in my clothes without me noticing? How long has she been here? How?" Tsunade looked at him with a smile that indicated she liked teasing her juniors before speaking. "A woman has her secrets. Katsuyu will let me know wherever you go, so don't worry about going too far." Yamato nodded, and Tsunade spared a single glance at Tachibana and company, who were now examining the dead Aburame shinobi who had suddenly collapsed after releasing the cloud of insects that were burnt away by Sasuke, and used the body flicker jutsu to go away. Yamato looked at her, and then at his genin, who all looked surprised and shocked. "I knew they'd feel terrible when they realized it was from Konoha, but I don't know how they'll react now that the reveal has become so blatant. Especially Naruto-kun. He seems to be taking this rather terribly for some reason." Naruto looked broken-hearted, his eyes were teary and his lips were trembling. He clenched his hands and tensed his muscles before he managed to speak in a soft, pained tone. "It's not because of me, right? I mean, I know the people in the village hated me, but..." Tachibana was quick to stop Naruto from using his overactive imagination to do something stupid and smacked the back of his head. "They didn't even care if you were awake or not," Tachibana reminded Naruto, who was holding the back of his head in pain. "They only attacked me, Sakura and Sasuke. So their target was one of us." Naruto's eyes shone as if he just realized what Tachibana said and then smiled happily. "So it wasn't because of me. Haha. Then if I save the three of you now, I'll be one step closer to becoming the Hokage, won't I?" Naruto said happily. Tachibana was dumbfounded by Naruto's emotions, which flicked like a coin, and said nothing until Sasuke asked him a simple question. Why did you consider stabbing him as an option? The question was important to him because it was out of character for Tachibana. Especially when he'd only noticed the insects when he'd used a Sharingan. I had a hunch. A hunch? Sakura asked pointedly since she didn't believe Tachibana's lame explanation. I mean, a practical hunch. Tachibana corrected himself. The ink paper animals didn't try to keep us separated. They moved along with us when we left our own hostages, and the worst offender of it all was the fact that Sasuke was battling the most ink creatures than all of us. While it might be because Sasuke could be considered the strongest of us to someone without intel, there were still too many creatures fighting him. Plus, I could see that the ink creatures weren't interested in testing Sasuke's abilities. They simply wanted to run away with the Aburame Shinobi by making flaws appear in Sasuke's defense. Test him? Yamato suddenly asked once he arrived at the scene. Tachibana nodded. I assumed they were testing us because there's no doubt that the Aburame Shinobi knew about our presence due to the insects scattered around the forest. So it is likely they wanted to test something about us. Perhaps it was a simple mission to gather intel on us taken from the black market. Maybe they are shinobi that betrayed Konoha and teamed up with Tsunade to buy our children to spit in our faces. Tachibana threw out a random guess that he didn't believe in himself. Yamato's brows jumped at the part about the black market and the shinobi switching sides with Tsunade. How innocent, he still thinks that Konoha wasn't involved in this. I guess I will have to try and direct them towards understanding the root. It shouldn't be difficult to get them to notice the cursed tongue eradication seal and then scour the black market for information regarding it, since that was the original plan anyway. But that was when Naruto spoke in a soft mumble. Not possible. Huh? What was that, Naruto? I didn't catch that, sorry, could you repeat it? Tachibana asked the boy. Naruto looked at the dead Aburame with slightly wide eyes before speaking. It's not possible for an Aburame shinobi to remain the host of insects if they leave their clan. It goes against the clan's policy to allow any outsiders to summon their insects. The insects would have died out if they were not fed the special food that the Aburame produced to tame them. Naruto's sudden claim left everyone a little surprised. Sakura opened her mouth for a few seconds, then closed it and then opened it to ask again, how did you know that? Sakura-chan, I learnt about it from Shino. I used to play with his bugs in class when I got bored and once asked him if I could make a bug my pet because they were so cute. Everyone frowned at the information, but Yamato and Tachibana were only faking it. Good job, Naruto-kun. That should make my work easier. That was when Sasuke voiced his concern. So someone in Konoha was behind this attack, causing Sakura and Naruto to freeze again since he had connected the dots. Why would someone purchase children from the Fire Nation? Naruto said in a slightly depressed tone. I mean, shouldn't there be enough children in the village already? I remember there being many orphans in the orphanage I grew up in. Naruto hadn't said it directly, but the meaning was clear. If someone wanted to purchase kids in such a roundabout way by hiding and disguising themselves as shinobi from another country to make a purchase, it was safe to say that they probably didn't have the brightest intentions in their minds. No one spoke about it for a few seconds before Yamato interrupted their thoughts with a slight cough. He bent low and then, under the gaze of everyone, pulled out the dead Aburame shinobi's tongue. "Ew, what are you doing, Yamato-sensei?" Sakura asked when she saw Yamato touch the shinobi's tongue without even wearing gloves. Yamato suddenly felt a little self-conscious about an action he was performing for as long as he could remember, but quickly explained. The shinobi died unnaturally. He should not have died simply because of a stab wound, since Tachibana-kun doesn't use poison on his kunai. This means that there are some seals at play, and since there are not on any visible spots on his body, it is likely that Yamato didn't have to say any more. The tongue that had been pulled out was marked with a set of 5 black lines, with the bottom 2 being fragmented. What is that? Naruto asked as Yamato gave them a closer look at the seal. It is probably the seal that killed him, Yamato said while Tachibana looked at it closely. Tisk. It's compressed, and I don't know the method used to do that. So I can't uncompress it with my skills alone. So we have to figure out who in the village can use such complicated seals. Tachibana threw out a guess to keep the conversation moving. Yamato nodded. We will work as a team to figure out the identity of the mysterious shinobi behind the shadows trying to purchase children. Everyone's eyes hardened and they all nodded. Sasuke, Sakura and Naruto had righteous intentions, but Tachibana was thinking something else. Tachibana wondered what Tsunade and Yamato had spoken about when they met in the trees in their hiding spot. Their conversation was short for Yamato-sensei to have given her any important information about his birth, or rather, creation. So they probably decided on a time to meet up later. Especially since I can see that little slug in his Jonin flak jacket. But if they do that, then I might not be able to spy on them. How can I motivate Tsunade further so she willingly follows us to the Root headquarters? Tachibana thought for a few seconds before giving himself a mental nod. I just have to dangle a bait in front of her. And Yamato will deliver this bait for me. With an aim in mind, Team 7 decided on short teams to deepen their knowledge of the Cursed Tongue eradication seal through an investigation in the black market. Naruto and Tachibana were one team while Sasuke and Sakura formed another. Yamato would act alone, but his clones were going to keep watch on his genin. As they walked back towards the village to split up and go do their research, Tachibana suddenly froze in his steps. Everyone was startled by Tachibana's sudden halting as they all quickly scanned their environment for any enemies. But when they saw Tachibana looking up into the sky with his eyes rolled backwards into his head, they felt a slight chill creep up their spines. Tachibana's head suddenly turned towards Yamato, who felt like in his current state, Tachibana was looking right at his soul. As if he was being judged for his sins to decide if he would go to heaven or hell. Before anyone could do something or knock him out of whatever state he was in, Tachibana opened his mouth to speak. On a snowy mountain, a single light can tumble down to create an avalanche, but a simple truth can help maintain its beauty. Tachibana kept looking at Yamato for a few more seconds before he suddenly closed his eyes and returned to normal. Huh, why are you guys looking at me like that? Tachibana asked, giving everyone on his team a weird look. Naruto opened his mouth and tried to speak something, but words never left his mouth. He shivered a little, before scooting closer to Sasuke and finally hiding behind him. Sasuke was a little unnerved too, but he had nowhere to go and hide when Sakura hid behind him too. Tachibana finally looked at Yamato with an annoyed expression and spoke in an irritated manner. What are you all doing? You guys look like you've seen a ghost. Yamato gulped audibly before he just nodded and asked, don't you remember what you just said, Tachibana-kun? Tachibana only gave him a weird look before shaking his head. I said nothing. I was completely quiet. Why? Did I mumble my thoughts out loud? Naruto was frightened even more and he almost held Sasuke's hand out of fear, but Yamato quickly signaled them to ignore the issue and continue following him. Tachibana simply wore a confused expression before nodding and following Yamato as his teammates made sure to keep their distance from him. Arg. Come on, I'm not going to eat you or something. Tachibana joked, but none of them listened. Meanwhile, Yamato was thinking deeply about what Tachibana said. Is it a warning from fate to tell the truth to Tsunade-sama? Can I even lie well in front of her? But was Tachibana-kun just pretending? No, why would he do that? But is he really some sort of a spirit medium? Tachibana, who had his spirit vision turned on, looked at Yamato's thoughtful aura and celebrated internally. I guess he'll be more inclined to speak the truth to her now. Entering the village, Team 7 split up while Yamato moved to a secluded corner in a rather dark alleyway before calling out to Katsuyu. Katsuyu-sama, I'm ready to meet Tsunade-sama. The little white slug with blue stripes on its body slid out of Yamato's flak jacket before looking at him with some confusion. What happened? Is Tsunade-sama not ready to meet me yet? The slug looked around for a few seconds before speaking calmly. I felt someone gaze at me for a few seconds some time earlier. Would you happen to know who did that, Yamato-san? Yamato's back instantly straightened. Tachibana was able to detect Katsuyu-sama. A slug that not even I noticed entering my dress. Yamato was slowly starting to believe in Tachibana's talent in future seeing as he spoke to Katsuyu. He was a genin in my team. He was suddenly possessed by some strange entity that gave me a warning. Oh. Katsuyu appeared to be interested and Yamato obliged. He claims to be able to divine about people's fates and he told me that I should speak the truth in whatever I do next. How interesting, I would love to meet this genin shinobi who can see the future. The only other creature that I know that can do that is the great toad sage. The words brought a certain sense of calm in Yamato as he realized that there were far too many things about the world that he didn't know about. Perhaps Tachibana-kun really is a seer. Yamato nodded to his thoughts before he spoke again. I'd like to meet Tsunade-sama please. As you wish Yamato-san. I hope you heed to the advice your student has divined for you, it is appropriate and wise. Worry not Katsuyu-sama. I shall do my best. Yamato stood nervously at the edge of the forest, waiting like he was about to give an examination he hadn't prepared much for. He stood calmly on a tree branch however and patiently waited for Tsunade to arrive. And Yamato didn't have to wait for long. There was no one in front of him for a second before he blinked once only to find Tsunade suddenly appearing in front of him without disturbing a single leaf around them. How skilled. Yamato was left admiring Tsunade but she didn't give him much time with his thoughts. Instead, she quickly asked him the question that was on her mind. Did you come to Konoha from outside the village? Were your family members a part of the Senju clan that split off from the main clan during the warring era and stayed hidden for a long time? Yamato gave Tsunade a wry smile before shaking his head. I'm afraid that Tsunade-sama has it wrong. What did I get wrong? If I were to answer your question, technically I would have to say that I was never a part of the Senju clan. I was born a normal human being. It was only after a few things happened to me that my body was turned to resemble a member of the Senju clan or rather the peak of the Senju clan, Hashirama Senju. Tsunade's eyes instantly narrowed, her mind obviously narrowed down and singled the words, my body, and, turned to resemble, but that wasn't what she questioned about first. No, what caught her immediate attention was directed towards, Grandpa, your body isn't as full of vitality as him. It doesn't even compare to his dying days. But it does resemble him. Tsunade quickly shook her head. Yamato smiled again with embarrassment before he quickly formed a hand seal. The tree branch that they were standing on suddenly sprouted a new branch which quickly morphed into another Yamato and formed a single wood clone. Tsunade's mouth hung a little loose when she saw that and she immediately started to check if she was dreaming or put under a genjutsu. Once she was certain that she wasn't, she quickly tried poking the wood clone with a senbon. And the result was obvious. The wood clone didn't dissipate like a normal shadow clone would. It persisted even after Tsunade quickly pushed in some of her chakra into the senbon and caused it to gain an aura of wind nature chakra around itself. Tsunade had questions but she couldn't frame them right since every question she could think of only gave her the premonition of a terrible answer. Her mind had already put together everything about Yamato easily but she was trying her best to stay away from her conclusions. Tsunade finally took a deep breath before speaking calmly. Did they use my grandfather's cells to change and modify your body? Yamato instantly caught onto the part where Tsunade used the word, they, instead of him or her or any other pronoun that would indicate that she was blaming a single person or entity. Clearly, this wasn't going well, or even as he had assumed it would since Tsunade was obviously angry with all the higher-ups of the village. Yamato sighed, his mind puzzled between answering the truth he had been told about or the truth that he had been suspicious about, but once he saw the unwavering hazel-brown gaze of Tsunade he sighed again. Can I even lie to her? She's bound to figure it all out anyway. Yamato finally looked into Tsunade's eyes and spoke calmly. When I was younger I was a member of the Root. I was a child who had been orphaned due to the Third Shinobi War on the border of Omegakure and Fire Nation. I was picked up by a few Anbu shinobi and joined the Root where I was given training on how to be a shinobi. Tsunade was paying close attention to Yamato's story so he continued. Along with being trained to become a shinobi, I and the few other children that were kidnapped were undergoing several experiments to perfect a weapon that Danzo-sama wanted. The weapon was the wood-release technique of the first Hokage. Tsunade's eyes trembled. These experiments involved transplanting a few of the cultivated cells of the first Hokage into our bodies. In the initial stages of the experiment, we were given the cells of normal Senju clan members to test our compatibility. And only when we were found to be a suitable match were we given the first Hokage's cells. The experiment was harsh and cruel, and I was the only survivor of the experiment in the end. Tsunade's fists clenched and her jaw tightened. She spoke barely to ask a single question. Who was involved? Yamato looked into Tsunade's eyes for a few seconds before speaking. Danzo-sama, Orochimaru-sama. But Tsunade didn't budge. She kept looking at Yamato intensely and he was forced to buckle under the pressure. Although I don't know if this other person was involved. I often heard the person's name through the other orphaned children who were being experimented on. They were children of the Shinobi of Konoha who had died in battle. They were promised a nice life if they lived through the experiment. Who? The third Hokage-sama. Tsunade's eyes shut for a second as she fist trembled in anger. She remained like that for a while before she finally opened her eyes that were burning with anger in them. Are the experiments still going on? Tsunade asked. Yamato shook his head a little. Although I don't have an exact answer for this question, I don't think the experiment with the first Hokage's cells is still ongoing in the village. Especially since Danzo-sama was given a complete version of the experiment after I survived. I sense a but Danzo-sama has begun collecting children once again. I do not know what it is for now, but I suspect something similar happening once again. The Hokage-sama also wants to know more about it, which is why Team 7 has been assigned this mission. Although for the team the mission is simply to learn about the darker side of Konoha, my job is to figure out what Danzo-sama is trying to achieve now. Tsunade looked furious. Her lips were trembling and her eyes also had tears. Even still she looked more furious than sad or disappointed. For the next several minutes, Tsunade opened and closed her mouth several times, but she couldn't bring herself to ask any questions. After a while, Tsunade finally sighed and relaxed a little. She looked at the blue sky for a while before looking at Yamato with a firm gaze as she spoke with authority. I will join you on this mission. Yamato's eyes widened, but before he could say a thing Tsunade continued. But I won't reveal myself or Shizune, my assistant, to your team. I won't interfere with them. All I need is for you to create an opportunity for me to explore the root base. I will hand you over the information I gather at the end of the mission so that you can report to the Hokuserutobi Hiruzen. Yamato gulped audibly. He could see the ferocity in Tsunade's eyes and hence didn't try to bargain for anything else. He simply nodded and Tsunade looked at him for a few seconds before speaking calmly, good. Tsunade's thoughts on the other hand were a jumbled mess. But one of them reverberated clearly in her mind. Should I kill them or not? No. Simply killing them wouldn't do the situation any justice. Those old bastards should get what they deserve. And I'll make sure they get it. I'll be the judge, the jury and the executioner. In another part of the village, Tachibana, who was now inside the washroom, opened his eyes with a smile on his face as he looked at the pendulum that was spinning clockwise. So that made Tsunade angry against everyone. Good lord, I wonder what she'll be able to pull off with Mito Boss-san helping her and acting according to my plan. Mito Boss-san should have also started her part of the plan from tomorrow. Tachibana walked to a stand in the underground market along with Naruto, who was disguised like him into random adults using the transformation jutsu. The stand they were at had a short like and forced them to wait for a few minutes before it was their turn. Information or tasks? The dealer behind the counter asked as he looked at Tachibana calmly since he looked more composed than Naruto. Information. Tachibana said, slapping a few stacks of cash that they had earned from selling Naruto to Onizuka onto the table. The man looked at the cash and counted them patiently and then looked back up at Tachibana. What do you want to know? Tachibana looked at the man straight in the eyes while speaking. People with seals on their tongues that die before you can ask them anything. The man behind the desk frowned at the description. Any problem? That will cost you a lot more than this, the dealer said, flicking through the stacks of cash that Tachibana had already provided him. How much? Tachibana asked with a similar frown. That information will cost you 1,000,000 ryo alone, but you'll also have to either pay double that amount to get the information easily without any checking or verifications, or you'll have to bring in someone trusted so that we can give you the information and expect you to do us no harm. Tachibana's frown only deepened, since 1,000,000 or 2,000,000 ryo wasn't something he could just wantonly give out of his bag. He thought about it for a while, but in the end, he just shook his head and collected the money from the dealer before leaving the counter with Naruto. Before leaving, however, Tachibana asked the dealer a question that came from a sharp idea: would you happen to know anyone that uses or fights using ink monsters? The man's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. That I can get you for the amount you gave me. Tachibana nodded and gave the man the stacks of money back before waiting to listen to his response, especially Naruto, who was standing beside him with a saddened heart. The shock that his own village was behind such a thing hadn't left yet. We don't know the name of the person with the ink creatures, but the market calls him Artist Shinobi. He's been seen only in and around the Land of Fire, but never in other faraway regions. He has a typical routine and comes out for a mission every 2 to 3 weeks, and was most recently spotted working with a few shinobi from Sunade, escorting them from the borders all the way to the capital. Tachibana nodded in thanks before leaving the underground market with Naruto, who was keeping his hands clenched tight. The shinobi we're after could be from other smaller villages in the Land of Fire. They could also just be spies for other nations, Tachibana said in an attempt to console Naruto's broken heart, but the boy was lost in his own world. They moved around in different areas of the underground market and tried various other dealers to gain information about the Cursed Tongue Eradication Seal, but none of them agreed to reprice their information at Tachibana's or Naruto's request. By the end of the day, Tachibana and company reconvened with Yamato to bring their findings to the table, literally, since they had gathered around a table in their room at the inn. We couldn't find much about the people using the seal in the black market. Sakura shook her head while giving her report. After a lot of digging, all we learnt was that the black market is also after knowledge about the organization's location, since they are responsible for several sabotages and attacks against other Ronin during missions. Damn, I should have used divination to sell them this information. I would have gotten good money. Tachibana thought, well, I can just sneak out at night while pretending to go on a walk to give them information about Danzo's location. Yamato nodded at Sakura's report after making sure that Sasuke had nothing more to add. I expected as much, since the root meddles in the affairs of other shinobi nations and is kept strictly under wraps. Yamato then turned towards Tachibana and Naruto. Surprisingly, Tachibana remained silent this time, allowing Naruto to be the one to give their report. Naruto's eyes were sharp and filled with anger, and there was also a hint or a trace of redness in his sky-blue pupils. Yamato noticed the change but didn't do anything about it yet. Tachibana-kun and I figured out that the organization is part of the village, or at least it is part of a shinobi village in the Fire Nation. Naruto didn't say it, but his words indicated the same thing. It confirmed their suspicions regarding the Aburame shinobi who was found dead after he killed himself when he was caught. Sakura gasped audibly while Sasuke's eyes narrowed sharply. They all then looked at Yamato, trying to understand what they would do next. There was a sense of hope in their eyes that Yamato didn't miss, but simultaneously he put a pause to their expectations. A mission that involves spying on shinobi from our own village is a delicate one to handle. But since Hokage-sama trusts us to uncover the truth, we must remain vigilant and perform this mission to the best of our abilities. Naruto calmed down a little because he realized that Yamato wouldn't stop them from discovering more about the mission and searching for the missing kids. His eyes returned back to their pristine blue as he looked at Yamato and spoke before anyone else. How will we identify them, sensei? That was when Yamato looked at Tachibana. What are you looking at me for? Tachibana asked indignantly. But now everyone was looking at him. Fine, I have a plan, all right. But I don't know if this will succeed or fail. Suddenly all of them began to look at Tachibana with glowing eyes while Yamato just laughed casually in his mind. I knew that Tachibana was good at forming strategies given his sharp mind, but I hadn't expected him to figure out the plan I had in mind. I was just testing him. Giving Yamato a soft glare, before speaking calmly. We can simply set up a stall in or near the underground black market while pretending to have information about the organization we're chasing. Then they'll come to us instead of running away from us. And how will we find them after that? Yamato asked, but Sasuke answered, we can just tail them by revealing to them only 2 of our team members while the other 2 stay hidden. Yamato was about to nod, but Loki interrupted. Don't worry about all that. We just need to plant one of my explosive tags on them and I can track them. Yamato's brows raised. I thought you could only feel them from up to 30 meters away. Yes, I can still only feel them from 30 meters away. Tachibana nodded. But then, everyone was confused as to what Tachibana was indicating. I can simply divine the location of my explosive tag and figure out their location for all of us. We just need to wait for our enemies to return to their nest and then we can learn everything about them. Yamato's eyes widened and everyone else got a little excited too. Suddenly, Tachibana's unorthodox plan based on his unorthodox abilities as a seer made them feel better about what was happening. With the pendulum in his hands, Tachibana let it hang freely as he closed his eyes and slipped into cogitation before asking a simple question. The person who Sasuke slipped my explosion tag on went in this direction. Tachibana repeated the sentence 7 times before opening his eyes and seeing that his pendulum was spinning clockwise. Everyone on Team 7 mentally sighed when they saw that the divination seemed to be working since they'd already waited a few more days after setting up a shop in the black market with Yamato's help. Tachibana was the main attraction of their stall since while Sakura and Naruto handled the customers at the front desk, Tachibana performed a simple divination behind the counter and told them the results of their questions. Although only a few days had passed, a lot of people had arrived at the stall to learn about the information they were giving out because of 2 reasons. The first was that Yamato had used a few of his contacts in the black market to increase and hype up the popularity of the store. But the second and more important reason was that rarely anyone returned empty-handed from their store. Since Tachibana depended on supernatural means to gain information, he could mostly answer all questions he was given and he always got the right answers. Tachibana was single-handedly holding up the entire store's popularity. At the end of each trade, Sakura would whisper warnings to their clients about people with the cursed tongue eradication seal interfering with others' jobs in the area so that they could attract the attention of Root Shinobi. Even then, it was only at the end of their 5th day at the new stall that members from the Root had showed up to check out on them selling information about the cursed tongue eradication seal. Yamato was the one who recognized them since he could tell at a glance that their emotions had been suppressed and that they had been turned into puppets or dolls. But Tachibana had stolen his thunder by simply divining about them as he did with the other members who visited their stall. And when he saw his pendulum spinning clockwise, he signaled for Sasuke to act and stuff a small explosive seal into the shinobi's ninja pouch after bumping into him on purpose. And so, currently, Team 7 was outside Tanzaku quarters with Tsunade and Shizune following closely behind them all. Tachibana had already noticed them, but he didn't want them to catch on, so he ignored them for the most part. So, Team 7, Tsunade and Shizune spent the next 3 days following Tachibana's directions towards the village. But as they got closer and closer to the village, everyone realized that they were moving to the mountain range near it and not the village itself. Team 7 was confused for a while about why they were going there instead of the village, and Naruto even had the guts to try and fool himself into thinking that perhaps the people they were searching for weren't shinobi from the village after all. But it didn't take much for that assumption to be torn down and trashed for him, since as soon as they camped on one of the mountains while keeping guard, they noticed several Konoha shinobi patrolling the area. Naruto was immediately angry since he wanted to storm into the cave that was being used as a hideout by those shinobi, but Yamato held him back. Sai Hokage-sama was right. Naruto is still too naive. But then Yamato looked at Tachibana. But, Tachibana-kun, it makes me really wonder if his abilities are only a way for his subconscious to figure things out faster than he can consciously. Is it really not a divination? How did he ever figure out, even subconsciously, where the entrance to the root base was? Can I go now? Naruto asked Tachibana again since Tachibana was tied to him by Yamato with the help of a wooden cuff. Tachibana shook his head. There was a frown on his face, but it wasn't there because he was stuck with Naruto even though it appeared like that. No, it was there for a different reason. Why hasn't Mito acted yet? Everything should have been finished on her end already. Or did she do it and the root is still this calm? I don't think Danzo would be this calm if what I planned actually happened. A day earlier, an apparition appeared on the roof of the orphanage that was being watched by a dozen shinobi at this point. Each shinobi was a well-trained member of the Anbu and they all stared at the little girl that appeared on it like hawks. Some performed hand seals, while others pulled out their shuriken and kunai, ready to launch it at lightning speed once the order to fire was given. Due to the heat in the past few days, dark clouds had formed overhead in the sky and a light drizzle began to fall while the girl simply looked at all of them. And then all of a sudden under a sudden bright flash of lightning accompanied by a loud rumbling thunder the girl vanished from her spot. The shinobi all looked around, but they couldn't find her, except at this moment something strange started to happen all around Konoha. A random passerby on the street looked up at the sky as the light drizzle slowly became harsher. At first, only the sound of the rain hitting the various awnings over various stalls and stores changed with the intensity remaining much the same since only the drops had gotten larger. But soon enough the drops started dropping down with speed enough that it started to hurt a little when standing in the rain. The normal people all around the village all quickly took shelter under various roofs near them while the shinobi looked around wondering why there was such a sudden heavy rain in the summer. Worse still was Hiruzen who was looking at all the frozen people in the village from his window with shock and horror. A village-wide genjutsu. How? Who? Hiruzen almost dropped his smoking pipe as he quickly clicked a button on the underside of his table to summon the Anbu. However, no one arrived, leaving Hiruzen even more shocked. Quickly dropping his Hokage regalia to transform into his battle gear rushing out into the village whose people had been trapped in a genjutsu all around him. Hiruzen first rushed toward the Anbu headquarters. He entered it and checked to see if anyone was around before giving up since when he reached the main office he found Shikaku Nara, the current head of the ANBU's strategic affairs, frozen in his chair with his eyes open. "Shikaku, if you're asleep, this is not the time to play games with me," Hiruzen said in a frantic attempt to wake up his military strategist, but Shikaku didn't move a single muscle. Hiruzen quickly poured his chakra into Shikaku's body to wake him up from the genjutsu, but as soon as he attempted to do so he found himself at an impasse. Why can't I sense any foreign chakra interfering with his chakra system? Inside the genjutsu, each person trapped in it was currently holding a piece of paper that described in detail the research and experiments conducted behind closed doors by the Hokage and his gang of loonies in the village. This, a stray civilian in the village caught up in the genjutsu asked with a soft cry as he looked at the picture of a little boy in the pamphlet. "This can't be true, my boy, he was captured by Hokage-sama to experiment with his death and soul." The man collapsed onto the floor as his knees buckled under the immense mental pressure causing him to lose control. Mito looked at everything that was happening with a soft frown. "Tisk. That monkey is already trying to wake someone up. I don't think I can hold him back for long. I hope that brat returns soon or I'll have to do something drastic." The rain that was pouring with the force of a million sharp needles falling from the sky suddenly started to fall with even more force as they started destroying the roofs and impaling the civilians and shinobi below. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. The civilians and shinobi who were being tortured by the sharp water droplets turned needles all screamed and caused a maddening symphony that sent chills up the spines of the shinobi that managed to protect themselves using various items or jutsus. As everyone read through the papers in the harsh weather, 3 tall, Thick, wooden stakes suddenly dropped out of the sky as they were embedded into the Hokage Tower in the village. The stakes were all tall enough for everyone else to view from elsewhere in the village, and they were all illuminated by pillars of light that shone down from the small gap in the dense rain clouds hovering above the village. The shinobi that were around quickly all realized that they were trapped inside a genjutsu, with Shikaku being the first to direct all the Anbu members to try and break away from it. He looked around and in a single glance deduced that the incident had something to do and was related to Danzo and the Root, since all the pamphlets that each person trapped in this genjutsu had details about secret experiments that were conducted on various children kidnapped in the village. Shikaku had known about the recent sightings of the little girl, Ghost, around the orphanage and the Hokage's orders about keeping a close watch on her. This had led him to prepare and learn about all the incidents that involved this orphanage, but it had left him with a sour taste, since it involved the Root taking away the children in the orphanage, often by force as long as they met their requirements. And while Shikaku didn't believe in ghosts, he did know that there were several jutsu in the world that he had no idea about. Perhaps this is just an attempt at destabilizing the hard-earned and hard-kept peace in the village after the Uchiha tribe was massacred. But I hope it is just that. The worst-case scenario would be that another village has already taken advantage of our inattention in the real world. Shikaku attempted to break out of the genjutsu, but he couldn't, and so could neither of his Anbu members. That was when they all heard a soft voice ring throughout the village. The voice came from the top of one of the stakes that were buried in the Hokage office, and it revealed a little girl sitting on the edge of the wooden stake. As long as you bring all the perpetrators of violence against children in this village and sacrifice them on these stakes by nailing them to it, I will let you all go. The little girl said in a sweet childish voice, her tone not reflecting the seriousness of its contents at all. But Shikaku did his best to not appear terrified by the strength of the girl that was able to put an entire village of highly trained shinobi into genjutsu, and asked by posturing to be braver than he actually was. And what happens if we don't? The girl looked at Shikaku directly, causing him to shiver for a second, but the girl responded to his question with a proper answer. For every minute here that you delay in bringing the perpetrators to justice, one child from the great clans will die in the real world. The eyes of all the shinobi widened. Each clan's heartbeats sped up and they all clenched their fists, since their future was on the line here. Even Shikaku was worried about his son. After all, apart from being shinobi who protected the Leaf Village, they all also protect their children, who were the cause of their smiles and their anchors to the village. But before the situation could turn rowdy, Shikaku spoke softly, "Could you please give us a little bit of time to Desi?" No. Did you allow those children to fulfill their one last wish while kidnapping them from the orphanages and people's homes? The question was met with silence, and so the child continued. So don't expect me to give you any time. As soon as Mito's words dropped, chaos and panic erupted everywhere. All the shinobi quickly started banding into groups according to their clans as they searched for their children and started to keep themselves safe. But Mito appeared merciless. As soon as the first minute passed, one of the children's eyes rolled back as they floated to the top of the wooden stakes that had penetrated the Hokage office. The first child to get captured was one that a lot of people recognized because of her peculiar look and her shy nature. It was Hinata. No. Hiyashi instantly screamed with worry, fear and a profound sense of horror gripping his heart as he tried grabbing Hinata, but found his fingers simply passed through her body. Hinata didn't make a single move or protest. It appeared as if she wasn't even in control of her body anymore after she started floating towards the tall stakes, towards the little girl waiting for her on them. In front of everyone's shocked gaze, Mito raised her hand and tore away the Hinata's head from her body. Hinata's body fell on top of the stake and blood leaked out of her neck, staining the wooden stakes a deep crimson red, while her head rolled down from the tall height and fell into the Hyuga clan as it stopped right before Hiyashi's legs. Suddenly, the threat that Mito had warned them about wasn't just a threat anymore, it became a sickening reality. The scenario in the genjutsu suddenly took a turn for the worse as the shinobi started to grip their children tightly as they all glared at the little girl on top of the wooden stakes with seething hatred. What happened? Are you waiting for your child to die before you act? The little girl taunted. Receiving no answer, she spoke once again. All right, for each minute that the perpetrators of this act are missing from the stake, I will kill 5 children instead, and after that, it'll be 10, then 20 and so on. Everyone's eyes shrank as a sentiment of fear started to ripple in their hearts. Outside the genjutsu, Mito looked in the direction of the Root's headquarters before quickly entering the spirit world and reappearing inside the Root headquarters. Shinobi inside it were all rushing about, trying to get to the village after Hiruzen had fired a flare to signal for help. Mito went unnoticed by everyone there because she was hiding in the walls as soon as she sensed someone appearing near her while she carried out the simple task that Tachibana had given her. Why did he ask me to stick so many explosive seals in this place? Does he want to erase the whole mountain off the face of the planet or something? Mito continued to stick various explosive seals onto other walls while hiding them behind the various wooden posts that were holding up the structure that had been carved into the mountain. After about 15 minutes of hard work, Mito was done with sticking all the seals that Tachibana had given her. Phew, all done. Now I can lift the genjutsu, Mito thought before using the spirit world once again to move through to the village where she saw Hinata searching around and trying to wake everyone up from their genjutsu state while working with Hiruzen. She hadn't revealed to Hiruzen everything that had happened inside the genjutsu and chose to work with him to help break the genjutsu instead. Hiruzen was just about to break the genjutsu with Hinata's help since she could precisely block Shikaku's chakra points to stop his chakra flow. But Mito looked at it and just shook her head. He's slow, I guess he's lost his edge now that he needs help from a child. She snapped her fingers once to produce a soft click before the genjutsu immediately shattered and she vanished from her location as if she was never there. As soon as the genjutsu broke, everyone looked around them in panic. Those who were suffering from the excessive pain of being riddled by the sharp rain drops collapsed to the ground due to the sudden relief. Other people rushed to their windows or doors to look outside at the Hokage office and see if gigantic wooden stakes had pierced it. Shikaku, who woke up, immediately saw Hiruzen in front of him, but just as he was about to orient himself and speak, his eyes landed on Hinata. A clear sigh of relief left his lips as Shikaku looked at Hiruzen again and bowed. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama, something unexpected seems to have happened. Hiruzen's brows furrowed, but he didn't scold Shikaku. Instead, he asked something else. Are there any immediate actions that need to be taken regarding the people of the village? What about the enemy? Shikaku shook his head quickly. No, Hokage-sama, I don't think there have been any casualties and I think we can't catch the culprit just yet, but I would like to make sure. I'm sorry, this was a big oversight on my part. Hiruzen's frown instantly vanished, replaced by a soft smile. It wasn't your fault. Even I couldn't break you out of the genjutsu. It was something that was beyond our capabilities to react to. Hinata here can attest to that. Hiruzen said with a kind smile, choosing not to discuss sensitive matters in front of her. Shikaku got the point and immediately nodded before speaking calmly. I can escort her back to the Hyuga clan compounds, Hokage-sama. I think everyone must be worrying about the Hyuga princess. Hiruzen nodded with his simple smile and Shikaku quickly escorted Hinata away while Hiruzen left behind in the room of the Anbu commander frowned deeply. What just happened? Shikaku said something unexpected happened. Something even he was surprised by. Was it the strength of the enemy? But no one seems to have died. I guess things are going to be alright. How was Hinata-chan able to break out of the genjutsu though? I didn't ask her earlier because I was in a hurry to wake Shikaku up, but I guess he does know something about it since he decided to escort her to the Hyuga clan himself. Hiruzen waited patiently for Shikaku to return to the Anbu office, having to wait only 15 minutes more for Shikaku to complete the trip. During this time, Danzo rushed out of the Root base to go to the Anbu headquarters because of Hiruzen's emergency flare that signaled for help. Once he arrived at the secret entrance and entered the village, Danzo noticed the intense unspoken resentment floating around the people in it. He walked along with his Root personnel disguised as random civilians and hence they heard the discussions around them very easily. Do you really think it was the Hokage that did all those things written in the paper? I don't know myself, but I saw several parents cry in realization during the genjutsu. They all really lost their children. Especially the Hyuga clan whose princess was killed by the ghost in front of everyone. Do you think they succeeded in remaking the first Hokage? No. I heard that the first Hokage's spirit was angry with the village for doing such a thing, which is why we've had 3 wars in the world that all targeted Konoha, because he didn't like us anymore and stopped protecting us. Danzo frowned as he heard this. Someone revealed to everyone about the experiments we performed on the first Hokage. Danzo was slowly panicking as he heard people complain about the experiments done on the first Hokage's body, which would easily implicate him. But as he heard more, he realized the hatred of the people wasn't towards him but towards Hiruzen. A strange thought gripped his mind and he entertained an even stranger idea. Whoever did this, perhaps I can use this to sideline Hiruzen because of his crimes and become the Hokage. Hiruzen noticed the serious look on Shikaku's face and instantly turned serious himself. What happened, Shikaku? Shikaku was a little traumatized because of the incident. He didn't know what or how he would break the news to Hiruzen since he was the one blamed by the ghost of the little girl in the genjutsu. Even still, Shikaku paused and explained everything patiently, causing Hiruzen's eyes to widen as he heard each detail. Are you serious? Hiruzen asked with furrowed brows, and Shikaku nodded quickly. The atmosphere in the village is tense. People are currently reeling from the effects of the genjutsu and the revelation, but I don't doubt that this incident will soon cause deeply burrowed resentment among them. I'm sure the bubble will burst at most in a couple of days. Hiruzen nodded since that was his estimate as well. He thought for a few seconds before turning to Shikaku for help. Do you know of any way the situation can be calmed down? Can we tell the villagers that a foreign nation did this to destabilize our village? Shikaku closed his eyes and thought for a bit before shaking his head. Unless you want people to sever the good ties we have built with the other shinobi nations and push things towards a war, it would not be a good thing. Because the people in the village are looking to pin the blame onto someone for their terrible experience. Hiruzen frowned even more. That was when Danzo stepped into the office. He had removed his transformation disguise the minute he stepped into the Anbu building so that he wouldn't be stopped, and so Hiruzen had an idea as soon as he looked at Danzo, who walked into the room boldly. The gears in Hiruzen's head turned as he realized a way to save himself from political and societal death. Almost immediately, Hiruzen rushed to put his hand on Danzo's shoulder as he exclaimed, "Danzo, won't you help your old friend?" A day later, Tachibana and company, still outside the Root headquarters, waited for a few more minutes before they all grew tired until Tachibana suggested, "Should I perform a divination for us to check if it is dangerous for us to go inside?" Naruto nodded the fastest. Tachibana looked at everyone's eager eyes and pulled out his trusty pendulum. "It is safe for us right now to go into the cave that is being used as headquarters by the child trafficking shinobi." Tachibana repeated the statement 7 times while entering a partial sleep state using cogitation before he finally opened his eyes and looked at the pendulum spinning anti-clockwise quickly. "It isn't safe," Tachibana announced, causing Naruto to be disappointed. But this only confirmed Yamato and Tsunade's suspicions, since it meant that the cave was the Root headquarters. Sasuke and Sakura were both wondering similar things too. But while Sakura was wondering if they would find evidence or not since everything felt too easy, Sasuke wondered if the Root was involved in the massacre of the Uchiha clan. On the other hand, Tachibana pondered a different question. "I assumed that after the friendship between Hiruzen and Danzo broke down, when Hiruzen would have asked Danzo to become his replacement in the tragedy that Mito caused, Danzo might have rebelled. But it seems like the Root is still mostly functional. Did Hiruzen not ask Danzo to help him and resign from his position? That's unexpected. I don't think that could have happened. I can't even use dream divination with everyone around here." Yamato was the one who spoke then. "Since it is dangerous for all of us to go inside, let's split up into teams and cause a distraction for the surface guards so that we can sneak into our enemy's headquarters." Team 7 looked at him and nodded. "Sakura and Naruto will be the distraction," Yamato said before looking at Sasuke and Tachibana. "You two will follow me." The two of them nodded before Yamato quickly explained Sakura and Naruto the plan. I'm sure the Root Shinobi will be unable to resist Naruto-kun since he's the Jinchuriki. They will likely try to cause him to lose control so that Hokage-sama gives him to the Root. Yamato thought as he explained his plan. Tachibana was satisfied with Yamato's plan as they split up from Sakura and Naruto, who both remained undisguised as they left their hiding spots and moved towards the mouth of the cave to begin the plan. Tachibana used his spirit vision to carefully scan for people in his sight through the cave system, but found it a little hard to spot anybody since the cave went rather deep and wasn't well staffed, at least at the entrance level. He did spot several secret entrances around the mountain that led deeper into the cave, but Tachibana didn't make any effort to reveal them since Yamato probably knew the layout better than him, having been a regular here when he was younger. Naruto quickly performed the multi-shadow clone jutsu and created several clones that immediately used the transformation jutsu to look like different shinobi, some of whom were exactly like the ones they'd fought. Deep inside the cave, a man opened his eyes and looked at the small flying insect that landed on his finger. The insect slowly crawled into his skin and assimilated with his body. As if having received new orders, the man quickly stood up from the floor and walked towards a particular room that was located deeper into the tunnels that bore through the mountain. Knock knock. A soft-aged voice rumbled through the door. Come in. The shinobi quickly entered and kneeled before Danzo, who was sitting in the darkness, going through multiple information scrolls that lay on the load table in front of him and on the mat beside him. What happened, Torun? Danzo-sama, I have detected Team 7 standing at the cave's entrance. Danzo didn't respond as he continued to read through the scrolls, so Torun asked a new question after his short report. Should we enact the plan, Danzo-sama? Danzo remained silent for a few more seconds before picking up a brush and signing the scroll on the table in front of him. His lips twitched and trembled for a few seconds before he quickly folded the scroll and stuffed it into his sleeves for safekeeping. Danzo then quickly stood up as he ordered in simple words. Order the personnel from Group C to escape by blending into the village or going undercover into the black market. Leave the rest here along with all the children and in classified experimental data. From Group B, have Sai follow me. And immediately send an order to Hiruzen to come here with his Anbu. Torun nodded, and as Danzo was stepping out of the room he mumbled. Is it time for the Root to come into the light, Danzo-sama? Danzo paused and looked at Torun with a stern gaze before he spoke. No. It is time to bury the roots and give it the best manure we can serve it for its growth. Make sure there are no fail points in our plans. I want everything to go smoothly. Torun nodded, and within seconds, Danzo vanished. Although he stepped out of the room, no one else in the cave noticed him since he didn't take the main path leading towards the outside but a hidden pathway that moved underground and opened a little away from the cave's true entrance. After Torun disseminated the orders, all relevant Root shinobi either escaped into the surrounding areas or left the vicinities of Konoha altogether, leaving only a few behind as Naruto on the outside worked his plan. As soon as Naruto and Sakura entered the cave, they started to do everything to attract attention to themselves, with Naruto using the bold strategy of shouting about the children's kidnappings while Sakura under her transformation jutsu got into direct combat with the Root shinobi. Sakura was having a hard time with the fights since she was fighting on enemy turf, but with Naruto's loud distractions and a few well-placed explosive seals, she managed. Meanwhile, Tachibana and Sasuke entered the cave as they followed behind Yamato, who seemed to know where they had to go. Tsunade and Shizune followed similarly as they continued to go deeper and deeper into the cave system. Suddenly, however, both Tsunade and Yamato stopped. Their heads turned quickly as they looked at the same spot in the cave. To Tachibana, Sasuke and Shizune, it looked like Yamato and Tsunade were just looking at the wall like they could see through it, but Tachibana quickly reasoned. Danzo is escaping. No, I can't let him do that. Tachibana's brain worked faster than it ever had as thoughts rushed into his mind while he tried to figure out what he could do to prevent the linchpin of his plan from escaping. Tachibana's eyes locked onto Danzo's location through spirit vision, and then he saw Tsunade running through the cave system towards him. A sudden idea struck his mind at that moment. Tachibana's head tilted backwards and he appeared to be looking at the ceiling of the cave before his eyes suddenly rolled backwards as he entered cogitation. Tachibana stayed in that posture for a few seconds, creeping Yamato and Sasuke out. But no sooner than 20 seconds was Tachibana out of his acting as a seer as he looked at Yamato and spoke in a hurry. Yamato-sensei. You go ahead. Make sure you get out of this cave after 20 more minutes along with Sakura and Naruto. I need to go help someone else. Yamato's eyes widened as he immediately understood who Tachibana was talking about helping. Another vision, Yamato exclaimed in his mind. Without giving Yamato or Sasuke another chance to stop him, Tachibana rushed in another direction as he rushed past several root shinobi who tried to stop him by simply transforming himself into one of them. And given the state of sudden panic that had struck the root base, no one questioned Tachibana, who looked just like them, especially since he showed such familiarity in traversing through the cave when he was just moving around using the help of the other root shinobi in his spirit vision. Tachibana was moving slowly and calmly without showing any panic that might lead to him being questioned. So Mito Ba-san did plant all the explosive tags I asked her to. That means the plan was executed without any errors on her end. Then why hasn't Danzo still been sacrificed by Hiruzen? I wanted to use this method to divide their friendship and deal emotional damage to Danzo while also stripping him of any power in the village and also if possible getting him a death sentence. But now he's abandoning the root base. Are they planning something together? However, he always kept Tsunade and Danzo in his sight using spirit vision. On the other hand, Tsunade spoke to Shizune quickly. Grab any research papers you find in this area and leave from this place. If Danzo is leaving from here, he likely has something planned for this place. Shizune nodded and donned a serious look as she rushed away into the depths of the cave system. Tsunade also kept running, following her senses as she encountered multiple root shinobi, whom she easily beat up as she rushed towards Danzo. After a few minutes, Tsunade finally cornered Danzo by cutting off his path by simply punching her way from one underground corridor to another. Danzo's eyes first widened as he saw Tsunade entering his line of sight, but then they narrowed as his lips curled up in a smirk. I hadn't expected her to be here. But this is better for my plan. This way I will be able to take down 2 targets instead of 1. Tachibana saw Danzo and Tsunade meeting up and slowed down since he saw Danzo's spirit body turn a deep shade of blue. He's currently calm, rational, and is thinking deeply. Does Danzo have a plan of his own? The gears in Tachibana's head turned as he slowly unraveled and realized what was going on. I see. A smirk suddenly formed on Tachibana's face. This will be better. Danzo, Tsunade whispered, but the silence in the deep underground tunnels caused her voice to slither into Danzo's ears. Tsunade, the wayward princess of the Senju clan, why are you here? Danzo asked, pretending like he had no idea about what was going on. Tsunade's thin lips morphed into a frown as she heard those words. Have you finally learnt of what Hiruzen did to repay your gratitude to it? Have you learnt the price that Hiruzen extracted from you to allow you to roam around the Fire Nation? Tsunade clenched her fist and punched right at the stone walls of the cave, causing them to suddenly split open as Tsunade's fist passed right through the wall. Several low rumbling noises spread throughout the underground cave system as the crack traveled all around the mountain before Danzo looked at Tsunade with a frown as he spoke in mock disappointment. Angry to learn the truth. Why did I think you'd be mature about it when the rest of your 2 teammates were equally stupid and impulsive? Tsunade's brows furrowed as she looked at Danzo and retaliated verbally. I don't care if Hiruzen hid things from me. Maybe he still had a soft corner in his heart for you after he realized you were his teammate. But I don't have any such place for you. There was a soft pause before Tsunade spoke again. At least not because of that stupid arm of yours that reeks of the blood of the Senjus that had peacefully mingled with the village. Danzo calmly brushed his hand before pulling out a kunai. So had Hiruzen sent you to claim this hand for himself? Tsunade's frown deepened before she spoke while looking at the floor in anger and disappointment in herself. No, I'm here to present to him your head. I want to show him what I'll do should I find out he was also involved in the matter. Tachibana, who was standing away and waiting patiently for their conversation to end, felt a slight chill raise the hairs on his arm when he heard that from Tsunade. But he kept his focus on the two of them as he watched them both get ready to take a stance and fight inside this deep underground cave despite the heavy risks involved. Tachibana guessed that they weren't very worried because they both knew the earth style, hidden mold jutsu, which would allow them to move around through the rubble that would bury them very easily. But since Tachibana didn't know any such technique, Tachibana quickly began running through the corridors and panting deeply as if he was out of breath from a long marathon while running towards Tsunade. The sudden sounds of someone rushing through the mostly empty corridors caused Tsunade and Danzo to pause as they paid attention to whoever was coming towards them. Shizune is back. So soon. How did she know where I was? Danzo, on the other hand, was worried about something else. Is it Torun? What has he come to inform me about? But to their surprise, the person that stepped into the tunnel wasn't Shizune or Torun but Tachibana, who looked like he'd just run a marathon. Tachibana quickly looked at Tsunade and then rushed towards her. Tsunade-sama, we need to leave. Quickly please. Tachibana said quickly, ignoring Danzo, whose eyes had narrowed after seeing Tachibana. Tsunade was similarly frowning since she didn't realize what Tachibana was doing here, but his next words surprised her quite a bit. Danzo-sama knows. He is going to trap you with its help and then bury you inside the mountain. There are several explosive tags planted all around this place. Tachibana shouted while waving a random explosive tag that he had on him. Tsunade's eyes narrowed dangerously at that while the frown on Danzo's face somehow deepened. Explosive tags. Why would I plant them here? I need this place for my plan. I need it to frame Hiruzen about him being the one that manages this place with the help of his closest subordinates who conduct experiments here on various clan children. Did they plant a few themselves after they caught onto my plan? But how? I even told Hiruzen to come capture me while I was in the root base so that they could catch me red-handed. I need it so that I can trap Hiruzen with it. Danzo didn't stop to think anymore and quickly formed hand seals as he read his body to perform the hidden mold jutsu. Danzo leaned against the wall and right before Tsunade's eyes melded into it. Like hell, I'll let you escape. Tsunade shouted before performing the same jutsu as Danzo, except Tsunade quickly grabbed Tachibana while speaking to him. Grab onto me tightly, you don't want to get left behind and get buried under the mountain. Tachibana nodded and quickly wrapped his hand around Tsunade's waist. She pulled her along with herself and melded into the rocks around them. To Tachibana, it felt like he was being dragged through water on someone else's back who knew how to swim. Tachibana kept his eyes closed and his mouth shut to avoid getting anything in them as they escaped the underground area within seconds before they broke through the surface and landed on the ground right near Danzo, who was already trying to escape. But unfortunately for him, Tsunade had already broken away from Tachibana and arrived at his position, standing guard to stop him from leaving. You won't leave here until you answer my questions, you leech. Tsunade claimed boldly. It was at this moment that three groups arrived at their location. Standing below them on the mountain was a group led by Hiruzen that included various Anbu groups and Shikaku, while exiting the caves from similar secret entrances were Team 7 and Shizune. Team 7 had brought along with them several children while Shizune had brought along several documents. A fourth group, composed of various shinobi with face masks, made itself visible as it surrounded the mountain, forming a chain around it so that no one could escape. Tsunade looked at them all and when she met Hiruzen's gaze frowned prominently. Not understanding what his student was doing there, Hiruzen started the conversation. Tsunade, what are you doing here? Before Tsunade could respond, however, Danzo interrupted. Come to save your disciple like you saved Orochimaru from being captured all those years ago, Hiruzen. Hiruzen's eyes widened and his mind fell into a confused state as he looked at Danzo. Huh? What? Why is Danzo asking me about that? Wasn't the plan for him to come with me silently to the village and be locked up in the prison? But before anyone could respond to the accusation, Tachibana suddenly spoke up. Everyone, we need to get off the mountain quickly. It is about to blow up. That old man has set explosives inside the mountain that are rigged to blow up any second so that he can hide evidence. As he spoke, Tachibana covered his hand with a simple illusion to hide the concentration seal he made before setting off all the explosive tags inside the mountain at once. B B B boom M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M B B B B B B B B B B B boom M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M. Tachibana's words were confusing to everyone, but they didn't have the time or the leisure to analyze them since hordes of rubble were flushed out of the several cave-like entrances and exits that burrowed in and out of the mountain. The Anbu shinobi that had followed Hiruzen all jumped away from the area and maintained their footing by taking support from the trees to prevent themselves from being buried. Yamato along with Team 7 and the other children they rescued rushed upwards, avoiding the stone shower narrowly. While Tsunade was able to remain safe simply by punching away any rocks that came towards her, Danzo hid himself inside a small earth dome. Tachibana was engulfed by the hot explosive fumes that shot out of the cave tunnels, but he quickly teleported towards Yamato and Team 7 to keep himself safe without letting anyone else notice. The sudden explosion inside the mountain caused a large quake that reverberated for several seconds with secondary tremors as the insides of the mountain shifted around, trying to gain a new stable configuration that would keep it from collapsing under its own weight. The root shinobi that were still inside had been turned into meat paste while the children Yamato saved were trembling with fear. The dust cloud that had been ejected from the inside of the mountain slowly settled before everyone looked around each other with different thoughts. Yamato and Sasuke looked at Tachibana with wide eyes. Was this what Tachibana-kun saw when he warned us to get out early along with the children? Tsunade wondered if Danzo had destroyed the headquarters to prevent evidence from leaking. Thankfully I asked Shizune to collect any evidence she could find by herself. Meanwhile, Danzo and Hiruzen were both shitting their pants. Who did this? Danzo had a calm look outwardly, but inside he had several questions spinning around his head. I wanted to blame Hiruzen for all the experiments, but now that everything is destroyed, how will I prove it? Who did that? And Hiruzen was similarly dealing with a hurricane of thoughts. Did Danzo destroy it to prevent any evidence from getting to my hands? I thought it was just a coincidence that Danzo came out of the root base. Does he intend on rebelling and taking the seat of the Hokage for himself? Tachibana looked at it all with calm eyes before speaking in the same panicked tone he used as before. I saw it. I saw these children being tortured by shinobi under the command of that old man. Tachibana shouted while pointing at Danzo. As soon as Tsunade-sama attacked him, I saw him detonate the seals in place and run away. He wanted to hide all evidence. Danzo scowled when Tachibana spoke and quickly looked at Hiruzen. Now is my only chance. I won't get anything better. No. I was here spying on the shinobi inside the headquarters after I was informed about the kidnapping of various children from the orphanages of Konoha by multiple shinobi who were part of the genjutsu. I wanted to investigate the rumor and hence came here with a few of my own shinobi under the authority of the Hokage advisor. Shikaku almost immediately caught onto what Danzo was doing, but he didn't speak immediately, except he clicked his tongue and looked at Danzo with a frown since he knew what Danzo was trying to do. After all, Hiruzen had wanted him to take a fall for him intentionally. Hiruzen was next to catch up to what Danzo was saying and decided he wouldn't let Danzo keep on speaking anymore, since if he managed to sway the opinion of the shinobi behind him it would result in a mess that he wasn't very sure he could deal with. Danzo, you should shut up. Give up. We've got the mountain surrounded from all sides. We know well that you were the one that intentionally caused this incident to usurp the position of the Hokage by misleading the entire village. How dare you insult me and my loyalty to the village, Hiruzen? Danzo shouted as he stood with his chest raised with pride. Everyone in the village knows that there isn't another person as faithful to the betterment of the village as I. Danzo, how do you have the audacity to claim that everything you did was for the betterment of the village when you were the one that conducted experiments on children that were kidnapped from our villa? Danzo shook his head and interrupted Hiruzen. If you really think that it was me that conducted the experiment on the kidnapped children, why don't we ask the children in the first place? Surely they know best who was the one that toyed with their lives. Danzo then turned towards the children who were hiding behind Yamato and asked them a question in a bold tone. Children, do you know the name of the people that tormented you and performed dangerous experiments on your friends? The children flinched and hid behind Yamato quickly, but they were forced to answer when Danzo threatened them. If you don't name your tormentor right now, then you'll be forced to spend your life with him once again. The children shivered, and under everyone's tense gaze, one of them slowly peeked from behind Yamato before pointing at Hiruzen. Hiruzen's eyes widened with shock, but he quickly found a way to clear his name before his already sinking reputation tanked once again. The Anbu behind Hiruzen looked at him with scowls, since their respect for him had already deteriorated after the ghost girl revealed the happenings, but that was when Hiruzen spoke. Danzo, you cannot fool us. You must have used genjutsu on the children to trick them. I did not expect you to be such a coward. Enough, Tsunade shouted after looking at Danzo and Hiruzen, who were arguing like dogs fighting over a bone. Tsunade took a deep breath before she looked at Danzo and pointed at him. You were clearly involved in the experiment. But Danzo didn't give her time to speak and interrupted again. How dare you try and suppress the voice of dissent? Danzo said, quickly turning towards the Anbu behind Hiruzen, and continued speaking. Everyone. As you all know, Hiruzen conducted the experiments. First, it was his disciple Orochimaru who was involved in them and had to flee because my department uncovered his heinous crimes. But after Hiruzen allowed him to escape from the village, he used his second disciple, Tsunade. Can you believe that all throughout these years Tsunade was gambling outside the village freely without any commitment to it? No, you cannot believe such a lie, because Tsunade was being covertly used as Orochimaru's replacement in the experiments. She and her knowledge about medical ninjutsu were paramount in conducting Hiruzen's cruel experiments on children. She was promised to be given the Impure world reincarnation technique made by the second Hokage, which is locked in the scroll of seals, to revive her lover and her brother. Tsunade continuously experimented with the dead to gain this power and perfect it. All the Anbu looked at Tsunade with disgust, especially since she hadn't interrupted Danzo after he'd spoken about her loved ones. But Hiruzen was quick to refute the claim. Danzo, don't be a coward. We all know that Tsunade was out of the village during the entire time along with her disciple Shizune. There are several records from various money lenders who Tsunade owes money to. Are you seriously asking me to believe such a silly thing? Does anyone here really think that Tsunade, the great Sannin, the legendary healer, is a person who would waste their life by delving into the three vices of a shinobi? Don't think you can fool anyone with your bullshit. After all, how can such a heinous crime take place in the village without your support and understanding? Clearly you made special arrangements for your criminal deeds to be never discovered. Hiruzen frowned, since he really was guilty of doing such a thing, making arrangements so that no one would discover the children that were taken to help in experiments. But he had done them for Danzo, and now he couldn't just admit to it and drag Danzo down, since that would mean also dragging himself through the mud. The shinobi around Hiruzen suddenly started to lean more towards Danzo's explanation. They all felt like he was telling the truth. Although he hadn't presented any reliable proof yet, they all felt that Tsunade was involved in all this somehow along with her master Hiruzen. Especially since the ghostly incident in the village. He. Good, drag yourselves down. Make sure that you cannot remain standing. Otherwise, I wouldn't have destroyed so much clear evidence anyway. Now I should reveal myself and show everyone my skills. It was at this moment, when the shinobi were split roughly equally on both sides, that Tachibana suddenly spoke up. I know how we can solve this problem easily. Everyone looked at Tachibana and recognized that he was the boy who had warned them about the explosion from earlier. I can tell the truth from lies because a divine God has blessed me. These matters aren't for little children to interfere, especially not when you claim something as silly as being blessed by a foolish God. Danzo retorted back, but Tachibana simply shrugged his shoulder and laid out the situation in simple words. Currently you are in a situation where three parties accuse each other of the same crime. And none of you have any evidence. Which means that unless you have a neutral party help you out, the village will suffer. The village will suffer? Naruto asked a little confusedly. How? Good job, Naruto-kun. Nice assist. Do you want the village to be run by a person who was accused of such a serious crime? Naruto's eyes widened and all the other shinobi understood Tachibana's point too. So why not follow my proposal, since I can always be tested in every way possible to see if I'm telling the truth or not. That way we can easily decide who in the village is the right person to lead it at this critical juncture. I mean, do you really want a vile person leading our beautiful village that respects the will of the fire? Hiruzen's eyes lit up, as did everyone on Team 7, but the rest of the people standing around the now unstable mountain became puzzled. And Tachibana knew this, so he simply turned towards Hiruzen, who he would use as a stepping stone for the next stage of his plan. Hokage-sama, you know clearly how accurate my divinations are, don't you? Hiruzen, who was already eager to jump on the bus, nodded with vigor as he explained to everyone else present in the area. Tachibana-kun is a special person blessed by the revered god of knowledge and wisdom. He has the ability to divine anything with 100% accuracy. This has already been verified through various missions and experiments. Tachibana nodded while everyone else in the area looked on at Loki with a soft, untrusting frown. What's to say he's not associated with the Hokage and making a fool out of all of us? And so Tachibana spoke clearly, to prove myself and my ability, why don't one of you come up with a lie or truth that I have to figure out? I'm sure you would believe me better with a test that is given to me by a person of your choosing. Danzo remained silent for now, since he didn't want to come off as standoffish, since stopping a solution from being carried out without proper reason would come off as desperate and would stick him with a target on his forehead, because the Anbu were the majority. The shinobi around Danzo began to grow restless, since they were all at a higher level in the root and had some information about Tachibana's abilities, but seeing Danzo remain silent they didn't speak up. It was the Anbu that had arrived with Hiruzen instead and quickly began to look for their sacrifice. They quickly wanted to bell Shikaku for the role, but he declined for a simple reason: he was too predictable. If they didn't want questions to be raised about the authenticity of Tachibana's abilities, they would have to make someone else do it. And so they all voted for a random person close to them, which led to a random shinobi that had a porcelain mask resembling a cat with 3 red stripes, 1 vertical stripe on the forehead and 2 horizontal stripes, 1 on each cheek, being chosen for testing Tachibana. The girl nodded in acceptance upon being chosen before she turned towards Tachibana and spoke loudly, I have a statement whose answer the Anbu behind me already know. I can ask you the question at any time. Tachibana nodded calmly as he waited for her to begin. The person I love the most is currently sick. A soft frown appeared on Tsunade's face when she heard that, but no one noticed since everyone was looking at Tachibana. And Tachibana almost broke character when he heard that, since after hearing the question and coupling it with the girl's purple hair, he immediately realized the identity of the person asking him the question. It's Yugao, and she's asking about Hayate Gecko, isn't she? Well, I don't even need to perform a divination for this, but I guess I have to make them believe in something. Tachibana nodded while maintaining a solemn expression and let his topaz pendulum hand freely from his hand as he repeated the statement he had been told with some modification. The person the girl asking the question loves the most is currently sick. Tachibana said the statement 7 times with closed eyes as he let his mind calm down with the help of cogitation. Tachibana soon opened his eyes and, like everyone, his focus shifted towards the pendulum that was swinging around while hanging from his wrist. It's spinning clockwise quickly. The statement is true. And given how fast it is spinning, I think the person is pretty sick if I'm not wrong. Tachibana looked at Yugao for confirmation, but he needn't have, since as soon as the words left his mouth, everyone in the Anbu group started whispering. And their whispers only grew louder when Yugao finally nodded. But Danzo wasn't satisfied, and so he secretly signaled for his root shinobi to take action. This doesn't say anything about your abilities. You could be using a summoned creature's abilities for all we know. What if your ability doesn't even work more than once a day? Surely you don't expect us to believe that anyone in the world can know what's the truth by simply closing their eyes now to you. Tachibana looked at Danzo and his root shinobi but said nothing. Instead it was Hiruzen who struck down with an iron fist. Panicking now that your lies are being exposed, Danzo. Why don't we do this? I will ask Tachibana-kun to divine about both of us instead of just you. Why don't we figure out if what you say about me is true or not? While everyone in the group flicked their heads towards Hiruzen so hard that most of them got whiplash, Tachibana looked at him slowly as he internally smiled. How naive. Still sticking to the information he gleaned from looking into my mind. He really thinks that since he has been nothing but good to me, my subconscious would be molded by it and think he wasn't implicit, wouldn't he? And if someone could peer into Hiruzen's mind, he indeed was thinking along the same lines. And so with the root suddenly quiet without a valid point to retort with, Tachibana spoke clearly and loudly for everyone to hear his next words. As per the request of Hokage-sama, I will now divine to see if the two people, that old man Danzo-sama and Hokage-sama, are involved in the situation regarding experimenting on children that were kidnapped from and around the village. Tachibana let his pendulum still and then closed his eyes like before and dove into a relaxed state using cogitation again. Danzo-sama and Hokage-sama are involved in. Wait. Tsunade suddenly stopped Tachibana, causing tension to loosen a little. What happened, Tsunade-sama? Tachibana asked her politely while internally he was excited for seeing what addition she would make to his statement. And Tsunade's words did not disappoint. Also add to your divination to check if they have been involved in experimenting with the bodies of the Senju and my grandfather Hashirama. The tension that had relaxed slightly came back with full force as everyone grew stunned upon hearing Tsunade's accusation. People on both sides wanted to rage, but Tsunade, although seemed calm, was clearly anything but. It was clear to everyone that her stillness came not from relaxation but from rage. And so Tachibana nodded towards her and modified his divination statement to speak again. Danzo-sama and Hokage-sama were involved in experimenting with the bodies of Senju and the first Hokage and children that were kidnapped from inside and around the village. Tachibana repeated the statement 7 times clearly. Each utterance upped the tension by pulling the strings of this scenario taut to their maximum pull distance. Several people clenched their fists as they realized they had begun getting sweaty. Danzo and Hiruzen both looked at Tachibana with looks of shock. Both had wanted to interrupt and protest against this by making Tsunade ask about this later, preferably in private, but Tachibana had agreed too easily, without asking either of them for confirmation. And they couldn't interrupt him now that he was already on it. Not without a valid reason at least. Tachibana was about to finish the 7th repetition and the gears in Danzo and Hiruzen's minds turned at full speed, trying to find a solution. And they simultaneously tossed 2 kunai that multiplied into several towards Tachibana. Everyone's eyes widened as they looked at Hiruzen and Danzo's actions, but it seemed like Danzo and Hiruzen had shared the same brain cell as they placed their attacks in such a way that each one would perfectly deflect the others. It was to show that they only took action because they saw the other move first, to claim that they were just defending Tachibana from the other. The target of the net of kunai, Tachibana, remained with his eyes closed as he ended the short ritual of repeating the statement 7 times. But before any of the kunai could hit or attack him, Tsunade slammed her legs into the ground in a forceful stomp. The hard mountain rocky ground cracked as a tremor slithered towards Tachibana. And just when the kunai were about to turn him into Swiss cheese, the ground suddenly sprouted thick shields that wrapped around his sides to prevent any of the kunai from reaching him. All of this happened in mere moments, leaving everyone stuck in shock and horror. Almost everyone had pulled out various kunai, shuriken and other weapons like a tanto out of their covers. They all looked at Danzo and Hiruzen with little trust, but Hiruzen covered it up quickly. It was only to defend Tachibana-kun. I just wanted him to be safe from Danzo's attacks. Thankfully, Tsunade was able to save him anyway. Everyone looked at Tsunade, but when they found her staring at Tachibana, who had opened his eyes with a hollow look, they all looked at Tachibana too. And everyone had the same thought all at once. It's spinning clockwise. Sweat started to form on people's faces on both sides. What were they supposed to do at this point when two of the village's highest authorities were shams who kept rotting and corrupting the village from the inside? Tachibana, who had the result in front of himself, finally spoke after a few seconds of silence. As you can see, the pendulum is spinning clockwise. That means that the divination statement is true. It was as if the statement had caused the reality of the situation to sink in for many shinobi. Although unbelievable, it suddenly felt real. All the shinobi in the area gulped audibly before Tsunade clenched her fist to crack her knuckles loudly enough for everyone to hear. The shinobi all gave her a tense look before they were forced to look at Hiruzen and Danzo, since the two of them had locked eyes after casting a glance at Tsunade. With Tsunade clearly angry, and Danzo and Hiruzen looking very untrustworthy, the people turned towards Shikaku, who looked like the only reliable support. But even he was looking at it all with narrowed eyes. That was when everyone suddenly heard a loud angry voice that truly resonated with their thoughts. How dare you deceive us all, old man? Aren't the three shinobi sins something every ideal shinobi might avoid? I thought you were the greatest Hokage of all time. You are nothing but a scam. Even Sasuke-kun is better than you. Sasuke shot Naruto an annoyed look but didn't say much else. He knew the situation was tough and everyone was on the edge of their nerves, so he left Naruto do whatever he wanted to do. Yamato similarly looked at Hiruzen and Danzo before looking at Tsunade. What will she do? Will she keep the village and its people in mind, or will she? Before Naruto could say anything else, Tsunade vanished from her spot. The next thing everyone knew was that they saw Danzo flying before he was smashed into the ground by Tsunade. Tsunade's kick was about to land on his head and smash it open like a watermelon, but Danzo dodged at the last second by sacrificing his good left arm, which was pulverized instead of his head. Hiruzen was almost happy that Tsunade had started with Danzo, since he almost instantaneously scratched his thumb before slamming his palm onto the ground. Reverse summoning jutsu. A large puff of white smoke engulfed Hiruzen. And Tsunade noticed his actions, but her pause was only momentary before she tossed a few shuriken into the mist. Poochie poochie pooch. Everyone heard the sudden stabs of multiple shuriken. Before they all heard and saw the shuriken fly out of the fog and slice through multiple trees behind him, which only came to a stop after being deeply embedded into a hard giant rock. Yet as the smoke cleared, Hiruzen had vanished. Blood was splattered all over the ground and there was a chopped arm dropped onto the floor. Puff! Tsunade suddenly turned her head towards Danzo on the ground, but apart from his pulverized arm and thick blood stains, there was nothing else. Danzo had vanished too. The fury burning in Suon's eyes felt like hellfire. Her eyes searched around the area before they locked upon Tachibana. Without anyone even realizing it, Suon vanished from her spot and arrived in front of Tachibana. Tell me where they went. Tsunade asked with seething hatred. Tachibana, however, softly shook his head. I'm sorry. I could if they remained in a single spot. But I doubt they aren't already up and moving to rush around the continent. If they simply move around the continent a little, our directions could completely change from day to day. Tsunade closed her eyes and repeatedly clenched and unclenched her fist in anger and disappointment. I can't believe I let such scum leave my sight. How despicable. I thought he wasn't involved since he was my sensei, but this. Experimenting on my clanmates. On the body of my dead grandfather. How silly. Was I looking at the village through a blindfold until now? How did I never notice all this until today? Is this why it always felt tiresome to be in this place? Was this why I left to never come back? Because everything dear to me was crushed and ground away into dust. Tsunade contemplated deeply, but she was brought out of her thoughts when two old people suddenly arrived at the summit where everyone was standing. What happened? We came here as fast as we could after we heard that explosion from the mountain. Where are Hiruzen and Danzo? The Anbu notified us that Hiruzen gained incriminating evidence against Danzo and was on his way here to arrest him. All the shinobi recognized the two people since they were famous as the village elders, the people who advised the Hokage. And their eyes instantly turned red with anger as they glared at the two unwelcome people. Tsunade's anger was reignited, but before she could do anything rash once again, Shikaku stepped in. Tsunade-sama, I implore you to stop for now. The village will be in a terrible condition of chaos since we've just lost two very important people. If you go on a rampage now, what are you trying to even protect? Can this place even be called a village anymore? Tsunade shouted with tears in her eyes as she looked at Shikaku. Shikaku sighed and he couldn't come up with a clever retort, he didn't even want to come up with one. Instead, he looked into Tsunade's eyes as she spoke calmly. Please think of all the other people that live in and are protected by us all, Tsunade-sama. I beg you, please let the village adjust for a while. I promise you we will bring them to wherever you are once the village has stabilized. Tsunade looked at Shikaku and then at the elders who were looking at everyone with a frown on their face because of the hostile aura they were being suffocated with. Finally, after taking a few deep breaths, Tsunade shook her head as she simply looked at Shizune and gave her a simple command, let's leave Shizune. Coming here was a mistake in and of itself. I should have never taken that gambling lottery money. Tsunade walked towards the Senju compound with Shizune and Taunton. Her arms occasionally trembled and Shizune was looking at her with a worried gaze. Tsunade-sama. Shizune whispered, but Tsunade didn't stop or even react to the sound. Her eyes remained focused on the dusty path she was walking on while trying her best to ignore the swimming feeling that was taking over her vision. Shizune said nothing anymore and continued to walk along with Tsunade as they arrived at the outskirts of the village where Tsunade's home was located. Click click. Tsunade placed her hand on the doorknob and tried unlocking it, but her hands weren't able to make a full turn. Shizune, do you have the keys to the door? Shizune placed her hand in her shinobi tools pouch and quickly pulled out a sealing tag that contained the keys. Here, Tsunade-sama. Tsunade grabbed the key and stuck it into the door, but much to her surprise and annoyance the key didn't go fully into the slot. Huh, did that bastard of a teacher sell away my house too? Shizune frowned at this, but she quickly stepped in and tried opening the door herself with the help of the key. Is it broken, Tsunade-sama? Shizune asked after finding the lock to be as still as a rock. Tisk. Tsunade clicked her tongue and then walked up to the closest window before trying to open it, and to her relief, the window was left open so she could quickly enter the house. Shizune followed behind her, but as soon as she stepped into the house both Tsunade and Shizune froze for a few seconds as they saw used dishes on the table and in the kitchen sink. Did we not clean the table and the room before we left? Tsunade asked with a frown. Shizune shook her head. No, Tsunade-sama, I remember clearing everything. I made sure that if we'd ever return the house would be waiting for us in the best condition. So someone else is living here? Tsunade asked, annoyed. Her brows had furrowed and she looked angrier. But before she did anything else, Tsunade looked at Shizune and gave her a simple order. Figure out who's staying here. And make some food for us if you can. I'm feeling hungry and don't feel like going into the village. I will go clean myself. Shizune nodded and left to search around the house while Tsunade released a stiff sigh before walking slowly towards the washroom. As soon as Tsunade entered the bathroom, she quickly picked up the bucket that was filled with water and drenched herself from head to toe with it. She hadn't even undressed, but she made sure any blood that remained stuck on her body was quickly scrubbed away. She felt disgusted by the sight of blood, her hands rubbed them away even while they trembled when her eyes fell on them. Images flashed past her eyes as she remembered the day and its happenings before she dropped into the bathtub that had been filled with warm water. What a stupid day. Tsunade spent the next few minutes soaking herself into the warm water as she kept her eyes closed and wondered about what she would do next. Should I go back to Tanzaku? No. I'm sure they'll send someone to come find me to cover for both those traitors that tucked their tails and ran away. Slowly, Tsunade's thoughts came to a stop as she indulged herself in relaxing her muscles before stepping out and drying herself with a towel from her storage scroll and changing her clothes. After she was done, Tsunade calmly walked out of the room and stepped into the living room where she found Shizune waiting for her with a confused expression. Figure out anything about who's living here yet? Tsunade asked and Shizune quickly nodded. Yes, Tsunade-sama. It is someone called Tachibana Rei. He's living here and is quite close to the daimyo. The daimyo? Tsunade asked confused, and Shizune showed her a set of letters that she'd uncovered from the room upstairs. I found out that he's been receiving and sending letters to the daimyo quite often. The person is a royal family member and is likely the son of the daimyo. It seems like the Hoka, the ex-Hokage, assigned someone the mission of delivering his letters to the daimyo court on his behalf, but whoever the person lived here was kept in touch often as long as they were in the village. Tsunade took the letters and read a couple of them before frowning. So that bastard allowed this man to live in our home. How low could he get? Do you know where he has gone to and when he'll be back? Yes, Tsunade-sama. It seems he is on a mission assigned to him by the daimyo. The mission seems to have been quite important since the daimyo of the Land of Iron is also interested in it. Shizune explained, pulling out the most recent letter. Tsunade frowned but then quickly shook her head. Well, that's none of our business. Let's just clean everything up and tell him that he can't live here when he returns. I'm sure the village can give him a better living space than this one that is on the outskirts. Shizune nodded, and just as she was about to leave to cook dinner, they heard a soft click that dragged their attention towards the door before it creaked open. Tsunade raised her eyebrows and looked at Shizune before quickly walking towards the door and yanking it open. But what she saw left her a little confused. Why are you here? Tsunade asked as she looked at the boy she recognized. But before he could speak, she spoke again, quickly. Did Shikaku send you here? I don't want to have anything to do with this village. Tell him I will be leaving from here as soon as I want to. Tsunade was about to shut the door, but she suddenly opened it and looked at the boy on the other side again. Also tell Shikaku that whoever is the son of the daimyo that lives here should be given another area to live in. I'm going to be taking over this place since it is mine. Tsunade was then about to slam the door shut, but the boy finally managed to speak. This is where I live. Huh. Tsunade's arm froze midway through swinging the door and she slowly opened the door once again. You're Tachibana Rei, the son of the daimyo. Tachibana nodded. Yes, Tsunade-sama. And this is where I live. Tsunade immediately frowned. Then that's good. You can pack up your things and quickly leave. Tachibana looked at her and frowned for a second. So she was the one that lived here before. But where do I go to stay now? Isn't this a little rude? How did she even get inside when the door was locked? And why is she kicking me out of the place I was living in all this time, like 3 months? Tachibana's frown deepened, but he finally nodded. All right, I can pack up and leave. Do you know where I can go to live though? Now it was Tsunade's turn to frown. Don't you have friends? Ask one of your teammates to take you in. Tachibana nodded as he thought about Sasuke and Naruto before speaking up again. All right. I'll leave then. Let me take my stuff. Not a lot of things that I have around here. Tsunade nodded and allowed Tachibana to enter the house. And instead of following him around, she quickly walked over to the sofa in the living room and collapsed into it, leaving Tachibana free to do his thing. Shizune on the other hand helped Tachibana pack up his things before she saw him off at the door and waved a short goodbye before starting to work on dinner for Tsunade, herself and Tonton. Just as Tsunade and Shizune were about to eat, however, they heard a knock again. Tsunade opened the door and frowned. Why are you here again? Tachibana gave her a wry smile before speaking. My teammates are missing, and I don't know anyone else in the village. Tachibana knew it wasn't his fault that none of his friends were in their homes, but seeing Tsunade's glare made him feel guilty for some reason. He'd gone around to Naruto's house first, checking if the blonde friend could let him crash in for the night, but he was missing. Tachibana searched for Anbu messengers using his spirit vision, but none of them were available to help him find his friends since none of them were guarding the place. Then Tachibana left for the Uchiha compound where he searched for Sasuke high and low, trying out every training ground wondering if his friend was training himself to death, but he couldn't find him. The only option left was divination, so Tachibana quickly leaned on a wall, pretending to be waiting while he used cogitation to let his spirit roam the astral world as he figured out where the two of them were. Seriously. Tachibana nearly cursed after he saw where they were. I mean, they are important assets, but really. Did they think the other nations will just stroll in and capture the two of them? Naruto and Sasuke were taken in by the Anbu and were confined to the headquarters where everyone else could easily protect them. Shikaku's not wrong, but then where do I go tonight? By the way, am I not important to the village? Wouldn't it be terrible if the daimyo suddenly found his son dead in the village because of some other shinobi that suddenly strolled into the village? Tachibana conveniently ignored the fact that just a few seconds ago he was sure no one would simply stroll into the village, and after thinking about it for a bit, Tachibana retraced his steps to appear from the place he had just been kicked out of. And so I'm here. I don't have anywhere to go. You wouldn't want a random person to come to me while I was sleeping and assassinate me, would you? I mean, you know that I'm the daimyo's son, right? Sue. Tachibana gave Tsunade his best kitty-eyed face, but it wasn't working. Tsunade's eyebrows were twitching and she was trying to keep her hands from turning into fists to punch the kid away, but she managed to keep it to herself before speaking calmly. What about your girl teammate? Tachibana frowned when he heard that. Really? You want me to go to a girl's house? Tsunade's brows twitched, and Tachibana had a slightly hard time following her question and her logic, but as if realizing something he nodded hard. I understand. You think I should feel shy around you, right? But sorry, I don't have a thing for old lad, middle-aged lad, blonde ladies. Yes, I don't like blonde people. I only like people with neon orange hair. Tsunade, who was about to punch the boy, held her fist back before looking at Shizune, who was now standing beside her, as she asked, "We have enough food for him?" Shizune nodded. "I made enough for it to last us until tomorrow, Tsunade-sama." Tsunade sighed before she looked at Tachibana and spoke softly. "You heard what she said, you can stay with us for tonight. And from tomorrow you'll have to find a place for yourself." Tsunade quickly picked up her plate and stuffed it with food, before leaving the dining room and going to her room to have food in private. Shizune glanced at Tsunade and gave Tachibana a slightly embarrassed smile as she explained, "I'm sorry, Tsunade-sama is a private eater." No, please don't apologize to me. I'm the one that's intruding." Shizune smiled at Tachibana's good nature and nodded before inviting him for the lavish dinner she had prepared. "This is so good, Shizune. I can't believe I haven't had such good food in the palace. Seriously." While Shizune acted embarrassed in front of Tachibana's compliments, Tsunade, who had finished her food, quickly left her plate in the sink before returning after saying her good nights to Shizune. "Did you follow us from Tanzaku quarters?" Tachibana finally asked, just to make conversation as he cleaned the plates with Shizune. Shizune responded softly with a slightly forlorn look. "Tsunade-sama wanted to follow your team after she heard about a few things regarding the experiments on children and something about the Senju clan." Tachibana nodded and asked, "She wanted to know how our sensei got wood release." Shizune was a little surprised, but Tachibana shook his head and explained himself, "It's not that hard to figure out. The first Hokage was widely known for his wood release techniques. And when we learnt about human experiments, I pretty much had it figured out." Shizune nodded, accepting the explanation before she asked him a question of her own. "Have you told anyone yet?" Tachibana shook his head. "No, I haven't. I'm sure most of my team would have figured it out by now, except Naruto, though I'm sure even he probably has a gut feeling about the issue. Sigh, all this, it hasn't been easy on Tsunade-sama. I can see." After they were finished wiping the plates, Tachibana left Shizune after she showed him the guest room on the first floor and he collapsed onto the bed. On the bed, however, Tachibana didn't fall asleep. Instead, he looked blankly at the screen that only he could see. The system has detected that the host has completed the challenge given by the system to the best of his abilities. Does the host want to close the challenge and accept the rewards, or does he wish to keep the challenge open for longer for better rewards? Tachibana looked at it for a while before asking the system a question. "So will I get the Sapphira Castle right now if I accept the mission rewards?" Opening square bracket ... closing square bracket. The system evaluates the host to have done a lot of damage to his target, Shimura Danzo. The host has broken most bonds that Danzo had with the village and has caused him to be assigned the tag of an S-class Rouge Shinobi. Simultaneously, the host has caused Danzo to lose an arm while also permanently causing the downfall of the organization, Root, that he had set up. All of this qualifies for the best reward for the host, the Sapphira Castle. Does the host wish to accept the reward? Tachibana thought about it for a few seconds but then shook his head. Keep that on hold for now. I want to ask you another thing. Did my potion digest because of the grand performance I conducted? The current digestion state of the Sequence 7 Magician Potion is 99%. Tachibana's eyes narrowed and he quickly sat up on his bed and pulled out his purified kunai. After quickly setting up a wall of spirituality around the room, Tachibana sat down and began to go over the rules of the potion he had acted out. The first maxim is to never perform unprepared. Throughout this mission, I always remained one step ahead of the people in my play by using divination and knowledge about their personalities to make sure I was able to string them the way I wanted. The second maxim is to take the initiative to perform. Throughout this mission, I always made sure to drag the people I wanted into my play. This is important because only by taking the initiative to perform can I set the mood and the framing of the scene I want to display. This also leads into another maxim, which is to wield control of the target's attention. By making sure to ask the right questions using the right words, I was able to trick Danzo and Hiruzen into working against each other. And by using Tsunade's hatred for what was happening, I was able to protect myself from being caught in the crossfire once they realized that I was the problem. Next maxim is to always challenge the impossible, even if the final outcome is nothing but an illusion. Danzo hasn't really even died, but publicly and politically he is as good as dead. No one would ever sit quiet if Danzo ever returned to the village anymore. Even though he isn't really dead, he might as well be considered to be. And the last maxim is, try to get applause from the audience. Although there wasn't any literal applause to my performance, the audience's shock and surprise compensated for it since they never realized that the twist of my play was that the leader they all trusted so much was the person that was feeding on their blood, sweat and tears after all. By dragging Hiruzen into the play, I was able to set up a surprise that none of them expected. As soon as Tachibana collected all the maxims, he found his body regained the familiar lightness he always felt whenever he fully digested the potion. The host has fully digested the Sequence 7 Magician Potion. Does host wish to advance further to Sequence 6 Faceless? Tachibana looked at the system and nodded, causing a vial filled with a sickly green non-Newtonian substance to appear in his hands. The vial had bubbles emerging from its depths before they burst with a soft burp. And as soon as they burst, the bubbles exploded into a small face that vanished before it could say anything else. Tachibana looked at the vial for a few seconds before he quickly uncorking it and gulping it down in a second. As soon as Tachibana consumed the potion, he felt like his body had been set on fire. It felt like several ants were crawling under his skin as his vision slowly started to swim and flicker between seeing himself from a third-person view and his normal view. Tachibana quickly used cogitation to calm himself and contain the potion's effects as he slowly allowed it to merge and transform his body. It took a while but the side effects slowly wore off. Tachibana was sweating, almost as if he had taken part in a triathlon. I stink, Tachibana complained, but as soon as he found the sweat in his body irritating, it vanished. Not because it dried away, but because all the sweat was suddenly reabsorbed by his body. In its place, his body released a faint rose fragrance. How convenient. With a simple thought, Tachibana found his entire body structure changing to become different people as he cycled through the appearances of several other people who looked wildly different from him. He became an old man that was using a walking stick made out of his illusory abilities and then became a jubilant young child with bushy eyebrows before switching into Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura from his team. And although Tachibana could become Sakura, he couldn't change his gender. After performing his thorough examination and releasing that he could only change his height by a foot in both directions and only gain a little bit of muscle mass, he stopped testing the ability to morph his body into whatever organic shape that was as close to him as possible. After all that, Tachibana quickly examined his powers and abilities that had been strengthened. He found that he could now feel fire sources up to 85 meters away. This allowed him to sense the various small electrical halogen lights that lit up the pathway towards the Senju household. It was a strange sensation since he felt he could cause fire to erupt from the filaments of the halogen bulbs before teleporting to its location and exiting the flames from the blow-up bulb. Along with his flame jump, his air bullets and his ability to breathe underwater were strengthened by about 30%. But the biggest gain for Tachibana was the change in his spirituality. It had suddenly shot up through the roof because of his new potion. His chakra capacity had increased to about 3 times that of Sasuke, which was a lot. In more explainable terms, his spirituality, which he could have used to only use flame jump at its max distance for about 13 times, he could now use it nearly 30 times in a row at full distance. But suddenly, Tachibana had a strange thought: system, how will I complete the ritual required to become a marionettist? There was a slight pause before the system responded. The ritual for becoming a marionettist used to require the singing of mermaids to maintain the sanity of the person advancing to the sequence. But the system understands that this is not easily possible, and hence as a solution for the host, it expects the host to perform an alternative ritual. Alternative ritual? What is that? The host needs to create as many characters as possible and make more people believe that such characters exist. As long as the host makes stronger people believe in such characters, the ritual to help maintain sanity during the consumption of the Sequence 5 marionettist potion will go smoothly without any lasting harm. Tachibana read all this and frowned a little. So I essentially need to act as someone else. But aren't I already doing so? Yes. Since the host has acted as the character of Tachibana in this world for a substantial amount of them and convinced a lot of people about this identity, the host has gained 85% digestion due to pre-acting for the potion Sequence 5 faceless. Nice. A smile showed up on Tachibana's face before he hid it as he thought about what was to come. What will I do to fool everyone else and create new identities? Could I become a beggar? But that wouldn't do much since I probably won't be able to meet any strong people because of my status. Then do I disguise as an already existing person? I've done it once with Tachibana, but can I do it again? I could figure out a person that had visited the village a long time ago and transform into them to pretend to return to the village after a long time as an old man. Tachibana thought about a few more things, but couldn't find anything suitable for him for now. On the upper floor, Tsunade was looking at the floor with a suspicious expression. His spiritual energy suddenly increased. How? Shizune was of the same thought as she looked at Tachibana's room and for a few seconds. But after making sure that the house hadn't been broken into, Shizune dropped the matter. Perhaps it was a secret and Tachibana wouldn't want to share it with them. But Tsunade wasn't as easy to let things go. Is he related to Orochimaru? Was he also experimented on, which caused him to gain all these new abilities regarding divination? Or did the god he worships do something strange to his body? Tsunade frowned as she thought more and more about the issue. None of them gave her clear answers since she wasn't directly looking at Tachibana's body, and after a while, she decided she would examine him more carefully when she saw him tomorrow. Tachibana, in the meantime, looked at his system panel before speaking in his mind. I would like to cash out my reward of the Sapphira Castle. Is the host sure about his decision? Tachibana only nodded. There was a soft silence for a few seconds in which Tachibana heard the crickets outside ringing mercilessly before he suddenly felt a cacophony of mad ravings assault his ears. Tachibana nearly collapsed when he heard them, but he barely managed to hold on thanks to his supreme sense of balance as a clown. And within moments, he found himself suddenly extracted out of she body, rather forcefully before he was sent through what looked like an ocean of gray fog whose boundaries were filled with the maddening screams and ravings of what sounded like people being tormented. Finally, after about a second, Tachibana found himself standing in a vast empty landscape whose floor was shrouded in mystery by a thick gray fog that Tachibana was able to stand on somehow. Geez. A warning would have been nice. Tachibana complained while holding his throbbing head. Where am I? Tachibana asked. The host is inside the Sapphira Castle, above the gray fog. Tachibana looked around at the rather bland area before he thought about the vast halls that he remembered from the Tarot Club, and much to his surprise, a court suitable only for giants sprang up from the gray fog. Thick pillars that towered over Tachibana rose high as they held up a massive dome all made from marble while giving an imposing feeling of vastness and grandness. A comparatively smaller but still large table emerged from the foggy floor, bringing along with it 22 chairs that were all representing the different standard pathways to the divine. Should I start a tarot club in this world? Sitting in his seat at the head of the table, Tachibana found himself contemplating his future actions. I have this strange idea about what I can do with the Sapphira Castle, but I'm not sure if it'll work yet. If it does, I could easily amass believers to be my anchors for the future. But for it, I'll need to learn several things like making puppets and the soul system. Is it possible to reobtain a contract after it has been used to contract with a person from Pure Land? No host, such a thing isn't possible since the contracts are a one-time use item. But it is possible to impose the contract on a soul through the vessel it is inhabiting. Closing square bracket. So you're saying that as long as the body in which the soul exists has a contract with me in it, the soul will have to obey that contract? Yes, host. Tachibana nodded before doing something else. With his spirituality churning the gray fog, Tachibana quickly scanned around the nearest crimson stars, to figure out the people that he could summon inside the Sapphira Castle. But almost instantly he froze as soon as he saw the vague figure of a blonde woman who had a blue crystal necklace around her neck. Is that Tsunade? Tachibana carefully pulled away his spirituality from the crimson star and made sure not to touch it, even accidentally. But surfing around the other stars in the area, Tachibana felt a little shocked and unnerved. There weren't only the 5 cage that Tachibana saw, he saw Nagato, Konan, and all the other Akatsuki members including Itachi. How are there all the cage-level shinobi here? What is this place? A secret meeting place to hold the 5 cage summit. The heck? Phew. Breathing a short sigh to calm down, Tachibana looked at the situation with a little bit more thought. While I could summon them right now, I don't have anything to use as leverage to bargain with these people. I could act as a terrifying god and threaten them in the Sapphira Castle with the help of the gray fog, but that would just make them hate me, which would make them try and stop me from getting believers or anchors. Tachibana made sure to withdraw his spirituality carefully without activating the summoning function of those stars. Even though he had total authority in this place and was sure that no one could harm him, Tachibana didn't want to fight anyone carelessly. Why can I summon nearly all the strong people in this world from here? Because the Sapphira Castle in this world is in a secret place like the sage lands of the various sage creatures. The host can summon people from all around the planet as long as they meet the minimum requirements to enter this place. And that requirement is, they must have either a Kekkei Genkei or be strong enough to fight most shinobi on their own below the elite Jonin level. Sigh, how overpowered. While I might not be able to make them listen to my commands and orders, I could simply spy on them as long as I wanted to through the crimson stars. Even though it would be as blurry as a 240-pixel camera. Tachibana thought about it for a while before looking at the symbol on the back of his chair. It's here, the strange pupil eye symbol, with the various random strokes on the bottom. Time for some tests, I guess. Tachibana quickly left the Sapphira Castle and in the real world began to draw up the symbol he had seen on the back of his chair. As soon as Tachibana finished the symbol, he felt a strange sense of connection to it even though he hadn't poured any spirituality or chakra into it yet. So the symbol is connected to me in some way. Tachibana then quickly poured chakra into the symbol and to his surprise he began to hear murmurings in his ear for a few seconds as if someone was praying to him. So the symbol is connected to me, but what is my honorific name? What is my honorific name? The host can set any honorific name he wishes. As long as the honorific name points towards the host, the system will connect it to him. But if the honorific name is convoluted and isn't based on reality, it will cause the host to develop a split personality. Tachibana frowned upon hearing this information. Something that connects to me. My transmigration. Would something like, the fool that doesn't belong to this world. The mysterious ruler of the Forgotten Lands. The researcher who aims to deliver salvation. Work. The first line hints at my transmigration, the second line indicates my connection to the Sapphira Castle, and the last one describes me as Tachibana, a person that is researching sealing jutsus in hopes of becoming powerful enough to save myself from the divination of my death. And it sounds cool to other people too, since they'll think that I'm going to help them instead of myself when they learn about my honorific name. Will that work? Yes. Host. The system does not see any problems regarding it. Alright. Does the host want to use this as his honorific name? Yes. A weird sensation passed through Tachibana's soul. But what he didn't realize was that the rest of the universe was covered by such a sensation too. All three great sages immediately perked up at the sudden change that had occurred. And while the toads and snakes were confused, Katsuyu reminisced about the boy she had seen earlier. Is it his doing? I should as Tsunade to keep an eye on the boy. As soon as Tachibana felt the disturbance in his body calm down, he quickly folded his hands and closed his eyes as he spoke words that he had tied to himself. The fool that doesn't belong to this world. The mysterious ruler of the Forgotten Lands. The researcher who aims to deliver salvation. Tachibana made sure to keep his voice low, and as soon as he finished his prayers he heard sudden murmurings whisper into his ear. Tachibana quickly wanted to enter the Sapphira Castle and check if he had done right, but froze after a second. System. How do I enter the Sapphira Castle? The host naturally needs to perform the celestial worthy of heaven and earth ritual, but the ritual needs to be targeted towards the host himself since there is no celestial worthy of heaven and earth in this world. Tachibana sighed a little before quickly entering the kitchen quietly and stealing a few snacks which he placed at four corners of the room and used to perform the celestial worthy of heaven and earth ritual. Tachibana performed the ritual by taking 3 steps anti-clockwise in the form of a triangle and chanting his own honorific name. As soon as he was finished, Tachibana's spirit body left his physical body and appeared inside the Sapphira Castle while his main body was left unprotected in his room. As soon as Tachibana was back in the Sapphira Castle he saw 2 things. The first one was that the symbol on his chair was glowing slightly, and the second was a crimson star that was pulsating slowly. Tachibana first examined his chair and saw that it was pulsating because of his experiment from earlier when he poured chakra into the symbol he drew outside. Then checking the pulsating star, Tachibana saw that it was pulsating because of his prayer to himself. So it works. Meanwhile, Tsunade, who was about to fall asleep after putting the matter of Tachibana gaining more chakra aside, suddenly woke up when she felt that Tachibana had vanished from her perception. He died. No. I can still feel his physical body, but his spirituality, it's missing. Tsunade was about to rush quickly to check on Tachibana, but as soon as she stepped out of her bed she suddenly vanished in a puff of smoke. When Tsunade reopened her eyes she found herself in the Shikatsu forest, a place where all trees were covered in corrosive slimy mucus left behind by Katsuyu. Katsuyu-sama. Tsunade shouted in a hurry while looking at the small slug that was on a tree branch, send me back. Someone needs my help. Tsunade-sama. Please calm down. I have called you here regarding an important matter. Tsunade's brows furrowed before she folded her hands impatiently, indicating that she would listen. Do you remember the boy who could perform divinations? Tsunade's brows furrowed further. Yes. It is he who needs my help right now. His spiritual energy suddenly vanished. Worry not, Tsunade-sama. The situation isn't as bad as you think it is. In fact, it might be good for the world. What? Why do you think him dying is good? Was he that bad? Or did the toads share another prophecy with you? Katsuyu's small body shook its head slowly before explaining in the ever-sweet and wise voice, no. Tsunade-sama. You have it wrong. The boy's spirit was likely summoned by his god for him to personally witness his rebirth. Tsunade's eyes widened slightly. What do you mean? There was a slight pause before Katsuyu gathered her words and explained. I cannot tell you exactly what happened since it is a feeling limited to a true sage, but the universe has just shifted as if something long forgotten in it had awoken. Tsunade's brows furrowed further. Although she couldn't fully comprehend what was going on, she understood that the boy was the key to understanding what was happening. But before all that, she felt like she had a duty to do something about all this. Is it a danger to the world? Tsunade finally asked after some hesitance. Katsuyu's eye stalks trembled a little, not just the one that Tsunade was talking to, but on all the slugs in the forest. Some created a rustling sound, while others that were larger started a large but gentle breeze. But Tsunade knew that it wasn't in fear. Throughout her entire life with Katsuyu, she'd never seen her afraid, or even expressing any deeper emotion at all. So when Katsuyu's eye stalks trembled, Tsunade looked forward to what she was going to hear since she knew that Katsuyu was excited. Katsuyu's voice pitched up a little as one of her slug bodies spoke again. It would be a little presumptuous of me to make such a grand decision right now. But I would like to ask you to keep the boy close to you. He is unique, in many ways that I have never seen before. Tsunade's eyes narrowed at this. Keep him close. Tsunade repeated and frowned. Of course Tsunade-sama. You don't need to follow my advice and you are free to do what you wish. Katsuyu said, her patient tone returning, as if she was speaking to a child. Tsunade stood there in the mucus-filled forest for a few minutes, thinking about all the possible ways she could keep Tachibana with her, but each method posed unique challenges and benefits to herself. Like, I won't be able to gamble as often if he's around. Because we won't be able to escape fast enough since he probably doesn't have good chakra control and by extension good speed in using the body flicker jutsu. Although, now that I think about won't his divinations help me in divining the outcomes of my bets. But it'll be too obvious, and word about it will likely spend quick and no one will want to play with me anymore. And I doubt he'll agree to it. Especially since he's a royal and the daimyo is having him do things in the village. Tsunade frowned by the time she got to the last point and then finally shook her head. No, the boy is too troublesome to bring along. He'll probably have people trying to assassinate him and women trying to seduce him, and now that Danzo and Hiruzen are on the run, I doubt they won't do anything to take revenge on the one kid that put them in their position. Sorry, Katsuyu-sama. I don't think I can take him along. Tsunade shook her head. Although Katsuyu managed to appear a little downcast at having been rejected with her little slug body, she still spoke in the same respectful tone she was used to using. That is all right Tsunade-sama. I will send you back now unless you have something else you want to do here, like training in sage mode perhaps. Tsunade's brows furrowed and the veins on her forehead popped out. You're still on about that. I can't do it. That stupid thing to still my mind. What do you mean I can't think about gambling? I'm not doing that stupid thing. Ever. Send me back now. Right N. Before Tsunade could say another word she was back in her room in a puff of smoke. Tsunade sent a glance in the direction of Tachibana's position in the house before collapsing into her bed. Well, he's sleeping now. But the next time he is summoned by whatever god it is, I'll make sure to examine him closely. If I can't help Katsuyu by keeping him close, I can at least give her some of my observations. The night progressed quickly before Tsunade was forced awake when Taunton was repeatedly stabbing her soft cheeks with his hard paw. Oink oink. Tisk. Why are you trying to wake me up so early Shizune? Tsunade asked without opening her eyes as she rolled in the other direction, trying to get Shizune to leave her alone. Tsunade-sama, someone's here. That brat. What does he want? I'm sleeping you idiot. Come back later. Just because I let you live here doesn't mean you can ask me for an autograph. Shizune became silent for a few seconds before a soft deep cough was heard from outside the room. It's Shikaku-sama. He wants to talk to you about something important and urgent. Tsunade stayed silent for a few seconds, a little embarrassed. Why didn't she start with that? Why didn't I just sense who was outside? Tsunade pushed herself off the bed and glared at Shizune, who just slumped down into Tsunade's bed with a deadpan expression since she had clearly just woken up herself. Before going off to the door, where she stood for a few seconds fixing her appearance using the mirror on it, after which she stepped out of the room and into the corridor where Shikaku was waiting for her. "Why are you here, and why are you here right now?" Tsunade asked with a frown when she saw Shikaku, and her frown only deepened when her eyes adjusted to the early morning light that lit up the corridor and unmasked his face from darkness. Shikaku didn't look well. It looked like someone had stabbed him in the guts multiple times before cruelly twisting around the knife a few times for good measure. Shikaku immediately shook his head as he started to speak. "The situation is not looking good, Tsunade-sama. Both Kumogakure and Iwagakure have started building forces and temporary forts at our borders with other nations in between." Tsunade's frown only deepened and her eyes narrowed as she gave Shikaku a good look after turning serious herself. Shikaku's eye bags were puffed as if he hadn't slept a wink for a long time, and his hair, she knew all the Nara took great care of, was messy with strands sticking out of the pineapple-style ponytail they usually wore. This, Tsunade quickly sensed around themselves, and along with noticing that Tachibana was awake and doing something while sitting on the floor, noticed that there were no Anbu around the house. Shikaku had come here in secret. "The situation is bad. How many?" Shikaku's expression turned grim as he spoke. 3,000 on the northeast and 2,000 on the northwest from Kumo and Iwa respectively. Tsunade's eyes widened and she almost raised her voice and punched the wall beside her in anger, but she controlled herself to only tap it. Tsunade took a deep breath in to calm herself before releasing it to relax as she spoke softly, making sure that Tachibana wouldn't overhear her. "Any news from the other countries? I heard about Omegakure adopting a mostly neutral stance against all the Great Five because of the Akatsuki from Jiraiya. I doubt they are going to let Onoki enter their land so easily without retaliation." Shikaku sighed a little and nodded. "We haven't been able to contact them in any way. But they do appear to be taking measures to prepare a fight against Onoki. So the threat from the northwest is a little low and might only be an act to pressure us. But it hasn't been ruled out yet that AIM isn't working with them instead, since we don't know the goals of the Akatsuki very well and because the Akatsuki have been reported to have worked for Iwa before." Tsunade nodded and then waited for Shikaku to tell her about Kumo. Kumo, however, is much trickier. They've already joined hands with Yugakure, the land of hot water, and Otogakure can also not be trusted since they only interacted with the root. Much else need not be said about them. Tsunade felt a slight hatred bubble up in her as she was reminded of the root, but she quickly suppressed it in favor of imagining a solution for the problem she had been presented with. "I can't fight, not for a long term, but I could pose for a few to put pressure on them all to retreat. Do you have any strong jonin on standby? Ones that can intimidate the enemy?" Tsunade asked. Shikaku closed his eyes and thought for a bit before nodding. "This isn't the most optimal, but given how thin the village's forces are stretched because of the fiasco that has happened, there is one free." "Who?" "Yamato. He is currently on duty to keep the Jinchuriki and the last Uchiha contained within the village and thwart any attempts at anyone trying to cause them harm." Shikaku gulped for a second before his eyes sharpened as he explained further. "And because he is a wood release user, it should have a decent shock effect." Tsunade frowned immediately upon hearing this, but before she could say anything, Shikaku continued. "Especially if we use the Jinchuriki so openly. It will give them the feeling that Konoha is holding another trump card and that the situation is not as unstable as it seems from the outside." Tsunade didn't like what she was hearing, but left with no choice for now, she nodded. "Gather them and tell them to meet me at the village entrance in 15 minutes. Send along a Yamanaka so that we can stay in touch through their jutsu, you know, standard wartime stuff. You've been through it once, we can do it again." Tachibana was looking at Shizune with an annoyed expression. "Why are we leaving for the border again?" Tachibana asked Shizune while waiting at the village gates for the rest of Team 7 while holding Taunton in his arms. "It is a secret mission. The details cannot be divulged just yet without Tsunade-sama's permission." Tachibana's brows twitched as he gained a weird expression. You do know that I can just narrow it down through divination, right? Shizune didn't respond to that statement and quickly pulled Tauntaun out of Tachibana's arms and began to squish his stuffy cheeks. Tachibana turned towards Tsunade and saw her leaning on a tree at the gates with her eyes closed, trying to catch up some Z's. Tachibana activated his spirit vision to try and understand Tsunade's mental state, but when he found her aura colored a deep blue, he knew she wasn't just resting for no reason and that there was something serious going on. So Tachibana disregarded Shizune's frown before pulling his pendulum and letting it hang freely. He then went through a list of various mission types to uncover the type of their current mission. Not escorting. But the mission still involves going to the border, so some sort of information delivery mission perhaps. No. Assassination. No. But the result was a slow anti-clockwise spin, which means there is likely going to be violence. The danger is also pretty high. The Chunin exams. Are they being conducted in a different village now that Hiruzen and Danzo have gone missing? No, it isn't the Chunin exams. What then could involve fighting but no direct assassination in the border? Wait a minute. Border dispute. Tachibana looked at his pendulum after repeating a simple phrase 7 times, and when he saw the pendulum spinning clockwise at a quick pace, his eyes widened. No way. A war. Seriously. That will put everything into a mess. What if the Akatsuki take advantage of the chaos and increase the speed of their plan to capture the tailed beasts? I doubt with all the chaos that could get created, I'll be allowed to live a simple and normal life. No way. I am not going to let that happen. I need to stop it somehow. But how? Soon, the rest of Team 7 arrived along with someone that Tachibana recognized from the show, Inoichi Yamanaka. Tsunade-sama. The man greeted as soon as Tsunade woke up from her impromptu nap when everyone arrived. Old lady, you were the one that beat up the old. Naruto immediately tried to complain, but he didn't get very far since Sakura immediately jabbed her elbow into his ribs. Sakura-chan. Naruto groaned as he bent low to hold the pain in his chest. Tsunade had already realized what Naruto was saying, however, and had an annoyed frown on her face, but she soon diverted her attention to the task at hand. All of us will be going to the border between the land of fire and the land of lightning in the land of hot water. The rest of the details will be given to you guys if necessary, but for now, this is all you need to know. Tsunade's prep talk wasn't for Yamato or Inoichi since they already knew about what was going on. It was for the genin of Team 7 who were rather all annoyed at having to perform another mission while their first mission to return the children had barely just been completed. Now keep close and make sure to follow me. Or else you'll be left behind. And, Tsunade paused to glare at Naruto before saying in a harsh tone. Make sure you keep quiet. Because if you don't, you won't be able to tell up from down or left from right once my knuckles kiss your head. Tachibana, knowing what was going on, kept quiet throughout all this since he didn't want to annoy Tsunade any further. Instead, he only shrugged his shoulders when he saw Sasuke looking at him to see if he had any answers. Tsunade quickly turned around and began to lead the team of 8 people with a pig towards their positions on the map that Shikaku had instructed them about. They camped during the evenings and early mornings, choosing to only move either in midday when the sun was hot on their backs or during the night when it was pitch black. At each campsite, Inochi would tune into the Yamanaka network using a special jutsu and regain orders from Shikaku, who was making sure to do everything possible to keep their movements a secret. While the team was known to have left the village, Shikaku had changed the logs to reflect that the team had left the village to see to the completion of the mission, with Tsunade accompanying them to leave the village again to go gambling in Tanzaku quarters. Although Tsunade was hard on the genin of Team 7, she didn't have the luxury of time to cater to their individual needs. And so everyone including Tachibana was left with having to resort to eating food bars for ration and not taking a proper bath for the next 3 days. I have a plan to stop any wars for now. But, will such a thing really work? With his plan sorted out, on their last day camping in the wild before they reached an outpost, Tachibana volunteered to be the night guard, and once he was alone, he quickly entered the Sapphira Castle. Once in there, Tachibana quickly used divination to figure out which of the vast number of crimson stars in the gray fog belonged to the people he wanted to summon into the castle. Tachibana spread his spirituality to open a portal into the stars and began to observe them for a few minutes. One of them had a muscular, dark-skinned man patiently working on paperwork even this early during the day. A second was of a small dwarf man who was floating while sleeping. The third was of a red-haired man who was breaking down gold and jewelry into a cloud of quick and easy-to-control fine dust for making his weapons. The fourth was of a woman who was sleeping with her head on a table as he drool slowly leaked out and caused the table to start burning because of its acidity. The fifth and final person he checked was a blonde woman who was currently blankly staring at a kunai while continuously running her finger over it to produce some blood before quickly healing herself no matter how much she trembled. Alright. After one last check, Tachibana made sure that everything was alright, before dragging the spirits of all the people he had just spied upon. This better work. All the people who were lost in their own worlds suddenly froze as a wave of crimson light flooded their vision. Each one of them used their own means and methods to stay on guard, but each one of them failed at preventing themselves from being dragged into the Sapphira Castle themselves. They all looked around warily at the same time as they readied their weapons if they had any or circulated chakra to make sure it was ready for use in combat. As each one of them scanned the other people and the surroundings around them in silence, the gray fog that had been slowly swirling around them up till now started to fade away and clear their vision. And in their sights appeared a gigantic step throne at whose crown a man covered by the same gray fog that was around them appeared. "What are you and what have you done?" A bold voice sounded through the gray fog as a tan-skinned man spoke boldly while looking at the man on the throne who was looking at them all with clear disinterest in his posture. A short stout man asked with confusion as he looked at the tall burly man whose facial features remained hidden because of a misty mirage. "Shorty." Tsunade mumbled, but her voice was heard loud and clear, causing the man who it was directed towards to turn around instantly and look at her. "You. I don't know who you are yet. But I'll make sure you find you and beat the shish crack * my back. HMPF. What are you all doing? Can't you be serious? We've been dragged here, disregarding our strengths. What do you want to do? Threaten all the great shinobi nations at once?" Rasa shouted before looking at the man on the throne with his hands outstretched. A golden spear formed at the tip of his fingers before it was held taut in its position as the man spoke again. "Who are you? What have you done? How have you brought us here? And what is your purpose?" The man sitting on the throne didn't even flinch when the sharp end of the spear was pointed right at him. But after a few seconds, he finally stood up and slowly walked towards the red-haired man. While everyone stood on guard against the masked man dressed in colorful clothes, Tachibana himself was thinking other things like, "Can I steal this gold? I mean, if he was so nice to bring it here, then I should be able to keep it, right? Like, he's threatened me, so he should pay the price of offending me." Tachibana came to a stop in front of the spear and with his expression and gaze masked by the gray fog observed it with his spirit vision for a while. Tisk. It's just an astral projection of the gold dust that he had on him before he arrived here. I can't do anything with it. Useless. Tachibana finally mumbled out loud, causing his voice to rumble all across the gray fog with all the people that had been summoned into it to tighten their muscles. "Haha. Kid, he called you useless." Onoki spoke humorously while forcing his hands into a small box, causing a small white beam of light to form inside it. Tachibana looked at it and thought for a few seconds. Will I get disintegrated if I get hit by that thing? How are they even using chakra in this place? The host must realize that as long as they had chakra in their bodies when they were pulled into the Sapphira Castle, their chakra will come along with them since it is made from their spiritual energy. Closing square bracket. I see. The white beam in Onoki's hands pulsated ominously as he spoke with a sharp glint in his tone. Who are you? Why have you brought us here? How have you brought us here? Tachibana looked at the short man for a few seconds before shaking his head. Useless. I'm pretty sure the gray fog can obliterate him 1,000,000,000 times before he even releases that disintegrating ray. Even if he does use it faster than I can use the fog, I still have other ways to escape it. With that said, Tachibana quietly turned around, walked back to his seat and sat down just as lifelessly as he was sitting there before. His words had brought great annoyance to all the 5 people that had been summoned, as they had never been so blatantly dismissed before. The short man was about to shout or curse out loud, but Tsunade beat him to the punch. "The hell do you mean useless, useless? Tell us why you've brought us here, or don't expect to go back alive." All the 5 people's bodies hardened as they put on a tough front, as if agreeing with Tsunade's statement. Tachibana's attention finally shifted towards Tsunade. He then looked at everyone else before speaking calmly. "I brought you here." With Tachibana speaking, everyone paid attention. Rasa dropped his spear a little, while Onoki lowered his particle beam. "I brought you here to warn you." Tachibana said nothing after that and caused a small silence to occur before the short man re-aimed his beam at Tachibana. "Enough of playing around. I've been good till now. But if you can't listen to rumbly-e." The entire gray fog trembled, as a mass of it formed above the short man's head. It felt like the entire dark gray sky had cracked and was about to fall on the small man. Everyone became a little fearful at the display, but before anything could happen, the tan-skinned man vanished from his place before appearing behind Tachibana at light speed. His hand flicked towards Tachibana's neck, and within a moment, before anyone else even realized what was happening, Tachibana's head was separate. I was about to rejoice in killing the person before him, but before he could do anything, a shiver ran down his spine. The body that had just been beheaded suddenly turned into a poor copy made out of paper, before Tachibana reappeared behind A. Tachibana had used his skill, paper substitution, a skill which allowed him to shift any damage on his to his paper substitutes. Tachibana was holding a simple playing card on the man's neck, and its sharp edge had already caused a thin cut to appear on his neck. "Rude," Tachibana whispered and simply sliced the card halfway through the man's shoulder and left it in there to burn with a simple flick of his spirituality. A retreated immediately, holding his arm and looking at Tachibana warily as he quickly did his best to pull out the burning paper card in his shoulder. "Trying to escape, after you tried to kill me," Tachibana said sarcastically. "And where do you want to go?" "Home." A's expression morphed into a frown, but Tachibana was still impressed that the man stood still while holding in the pain from his body being burnt. "Sigh, like I said, I brought you in here to warn you." Tachibana explained again and sat down in his chair. "Warn us against what?" Terumi asked while looking at Tachibana seriously. "Finally, someone is asking the right question. Against going to war." Tachibana's words caused all the cage to frown as A and Onoki simultaneously spoke up. "You can't tell me how to run my country. Kumogakure Iwagakure will never bow to you." Tachibana looked at the two and shook his head again. "I don't care what you think. If you go to war, I'll make sure you won't be around for what's to come. And then you'll have to face the coming troubles alone, while the rest of the shinobi nations feast on your bones to grow stronger." Tachibana's words caused the cage to fall into confusion, but before they could ask another question or even clarify what he was talking about, Tachibana flicked his hand and disconnected them from the Sapphira Castle, sending them back to wherever he'd summoned their astral bodies from. Tachibana woke up with a lengthy yawn. "The hell is that smell?" Tachibana complained, but almost immediately shut up since he realized he was facing Naruto's ass since he was asleep on his side of the hard floor bed. Tachibana slapped it away with a smack, but that did nothing to move Naruto away and only caused his cheeks to jiggle in front of his face. "The hell? Why is there jiggle physics on this tea? Why am I thinking about that?" Tachibana pushed himself out of his small portable floor mattress and walked out of the tent. They had reached the camp and everyone had already clocked in for guard patrol duty with Tsunade. They were waiting for their resident Yamanaka, Inoichi, to inform them of any detected intrusions that they'd have to deal with at the northeastern borders. "Awake already?" Yamato asked while Sasuke and Sakura beside him looked tired and sleep-deprived. "The hell are you guys so sleepy about? You continuously stuck me with guard duty for the past 2 days. And didn't even stay awake half the time today since I was out of the tent because Naruto snored too loudly," Tachibana complained, but Sasuke and Sakura were too sleepy to care. Tachibana then turned his head towards Shizune, who was cooking an early meal for everyone, and walked over to pick a bowl of soup for himself. Shizune ne-san, you're the best person here. Oh, not your sensei? Shizune asked with a teasing smile, but Tachibana was ruthless. No, not even he is as great as you. His food's so terrible. It felt like he was trying to poison us with that damn abomination that he called tomato soup. I felt like I was eating sand. And I still haven't forgiven him for leaving me with no place to sleep. He left me alone to fend for myself. Well, sorry for not making something that suited your palate, Your Highness. And sorry for taking on a secret mission when the stability of the village was at stake due to your actions. Yamato said with a huff before walking over to get a bowl for himself. Sasuke and Sakura's heads were bobbing because of their lack of sleep, but they soon joined in. How do you have so much more energy, Tachibana-kun? Sakura asked while trying to use the warm bowl to heat her face up and stay awake despite the comforting cold that was lulling her into its embrace. Without even sparing a glance, Tachibana said something simple. My body is energetic because my great lord blessed me to be strong and sleepless. Sakura rolled her eyes since Tachibana had been talking too much about his supposed lord. In the past 2 days they'd been following Tsunade on their journey around the border. Although they were in a hurry on the first day they'd left the village, hardly stopping to take any breaks in between, Tsunade had slowed down considerably during these last 2 days since they were on the border. And no one knew the reason why. Well, except Tachibana, who guessed that Tsunade was just trying to process the warning he'd given all the caged shinobi he'd summoned from the different villages. Why don't you pray to my lord? Then you'll have. Before Tachibana could complete his sentence, Sakura stuffed a spoonful of soup into his mouth. Cough, 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 cough. The hell? Warn me beforehand if you're going to feed me. I don't mind being fed by a girl, even though you're not my type, but please. Do it elegantly. Sakura only rolled her eyes and cleaned her spoon with her top before stuffing some soup into her mouth. Everyone continued eating in silence after that, since there were rarely any moments of silence that everyone got to enjoy when Naruto was awake. Yet a few seconds later, Tachibana felt someone place their hands on his shoulder. But since he had closed his eyes to enjoy the taste of the soup Shizune had made, he assumed it was Sakura. Oh, you decided to give me a massage. Finally learnt the greatness of the child of the daimyo of the land of fire. I'm even more powerful than the sole remaining Senju clan princess. I can do anything I want, and yet I'm more cultured than the Senju princess who's known as the legendary sucker. What do you want from me, Saa? Hell, stop squeezing my shoulder. Tachibana opened his eyes and froze when he laid eyes on Tsunade. Oh, I mean, I wasn't talking about you. Tsunade's brows twitched and her grip on Tachibana's shoulder tightened, but then after a short sigh she spoke clearly in a bold tone. How do you contact that god of yours? Huh? Tachibana pretended to be confused, as if he hadn't heard Tsunade right. Everyone else did a double take too. So Tsunade repeated herself once again. How do you contact that god of yours? Her grip on Tachibana's shoulder tightened too. Tachibana's external expression showed that he was shocked, just like everyone else around the camp, including Inoichi, who was sitting a little away and sipping on his bowl of soup. But internally Tachibana was ecstatic. Finally. It took her 2 days to decide to seek me out and find a way to contact the person who'd summoned her into the Sapphira Castle. The others are probably thinking about things in the same line. They should have all started to search for information about the being that pulled them into the Sapphira Castle by now. Trying to figure out exactly what had happened to them. I'm sure 1 or 2, if not all of them, have at least come across information about me divining things in the capital of the Land of Fire. Especially those from Kumogakure and Kurigakure, since they were involved in the Land of Waves incident where their shinobi tried to capture the island to make their own port that was close to the Land of Fire. They'd have studied or made a report on all the shinobi involved in the missions, and so they probably know about me. There shouldn't be any direct records or reports of my actions in the capital. But they should know that I claim to be a seer blessed by a god. They're probably looking for ways to connect with me right now. I'd expected Tsunade to seek me out immediately after the meeting since she'd obviously connect the dots faster than them all because she's seen my abilities firsthand. I expected her to fall faster and try and coerce the information out of me faster within a day or so at most, but I guess better late than never, huh? But to think she was so resolved that it took me throwing around words like my blessings from a god for about 2 days to make her give in. What Tachibana didn't realize was that the real reason Tsunade was so disinterested in coming in contact with anything of that nature was because, from Katsuyu's explanation about Tachibana, she felt that things would be too troublesome to deal with for her. But thinking back to the helplessness she felt when she was pulled above the gray fog into the Sapphira Castle by an unknown entity, she finally decided to talk to Tachibana about his so-called god. Especially with the cryptic warning she'd received from him, with all the other cages. Tachibana looked at Tsunade with gleaming eyes, and a wide smile decorated his face. You want to know? Sure. While I can communicate directly with my god and talk to him whenever I want, you can't do the same. So I can't talk to him? Tsunade asked with a frown. Tachibana quickly shook his head. No. There is an easy way for you to talk to him too, but it doesn't guarantee a quick response. Oh, Tsunade was interested, and so was everyone else. Yes, all you have to do is light up 3 special ritualistic candles with specific fragrances and chant a ritualistic prayer for him. After you do so, you can just pray to him with your questions and it'll reach him. Tsunade squinted since the process was rather simplistic. It involved no seals or complicated chakra manipulations, which meant that it worked in ways Suan couldn't understand. And so she had a hard time believing what Tachibana was saying. What do I have to say? Tsunade asked. You have to say the follow. Tachibana suddenly paused and frowned as he instinctively saw a vision. He quickly turned towards Inoichi, the Yamanaka in their group, as did everyone else who looked at the man who was slurping soup. Inoichi paused when all the eyes fell on him and he gave everyone a confused look. But suddenly a startled shock replaced his confusion. He quickly opened his mouth and spoke rapidly. Tsunade-sama, there's been a reported intrusion at the right flank of the border. Kumogakure has dispatched 2 teams fo 300 shinobi towards the land of fire through the land of hot water. Suan's frown deepened and she looked at Tachibana for a few seconds before she sighed and spoke quickly. Pack everything up. We're leaving. And you. Tachibana was it. We'll have this conversation again later. Tachibana nodded as everyone else quickly began to prepare themselves. What do you think is going to happen, Tachibana-kun? Naruto asked with a downcast expression. Tachibana spared him a short glance before he continued to look ahead as they rushed through the jungle while following Tsunade. I'm sure whatever happens, Tsunade-sama will be able to take care of it. Naruto was silent after that, but a few minutes later he asked another question, this time in a whisper that Tachibana barely heard. Who is she anyway? Tsunade, Yamato, Inoichi and Shizune all heard the question but acted like they didn't. While Shizune was interested in Tachibana's answer, Tsunade paid no attention to it since she was more worried about what was going to happen at their destination. Tsunade-sama is many things. She has so many titles given to her that it'd probably take me a few minutes to properly list all of them. So she's strong? Naruto asked innocently while looking at Tsunade's back. Tachibana nodded. There probably aren't many people in this world that can fight on equal grounds with her. Silence recaptured the group once again, and after about 20 minutes when Naruto had another question, Tachibana silenced him by placing a finger on his lips and pointing in another direction. Naruto turned around and looked in the direction Tachibana was pointing with narrowed eyes as he struggled to make out anything because of the dense foliage around them. Sasuke had already activated his Sharingan and he gripped his kunai tightly in response. Tsunade and the other Jonin had also noticed what was going on and quickly took cover behind trees, with Yamato signaling Team 7 appropriate positions. Naruto and Tachibana hid behind the same tree while Sasuke and Sakura hid behind another. Yamato then gave them separate signals. asking them to spread out and handle the east and west directions so that they could handle any enemies that might decide to flank or escape through the sides. Hiruzen and Yamato took up the northeast and northwest sides with Tsunade in the center, while Inoichi remained behind everyone with Sakura and Tachibana given guard duty to take care of Inoichi's body in case he had to use the mind transfer jutsu. Team 7 looked at Yamato for further orders and he signaled them something simple. Make sure no one crosses our line of defense. Tachibana looked at Tsunade and saw that she was very relaxed. Is she not going to make a move until and unless necessary? Or it's because she's afraid of blood? But Tachibana wasn't given time to think of answers to his questions since everyone heard swift swishes along with light cracking of twigs on the forest floor that were rhythmic in nature. The sounds were loud in the silence of the forest, and as it moved closer they heard the sound of footsteps that rustled through the branches and leaves. The genin lay prepared in an attempt at ambushing their enemies while the jonin along with Tsunade had already vanished into the nearby trees, blending fully with their surroundings. Thud thump swish. Within moments, a mob of shinobi came into view of all the genin. They all had dark green clothes that camouflaged them well with the forest, but each one of their positions was laid bare before Sasuke's Sharingan and Tachibana's spirit vision. With kunai and shuriken at the ready, Tachibana and Sasuke cocked their arms to launch the perfect first attack. Tachibana was about to launch his shuriken but stopped at the last moment. His eyes widened as he noticed something peculiar. Their emotions. They're muted. Sasuke though didn't notice anything wrong and flicked his shuriken almost as soon as the shinobi arrived in his range. With the shuriken already launched, Tachibana had no choice but to attack, so he almost immediately pulled out the big guns, explosive tags. Damn, I didn't think it would be the Root personnel there were involved in this attack again. Did their loyalty for Danzo and the turmoil in the village allow them to defect undetected? Have they noticed it too? Tachibana wondered, but with no time to ponder he launched his kunai with explosive tags into the forest. If the Root shinobi are working with Kumo, do the Kumo shinobi know about Tsunade's weakness to blood? The shuriken and kunai that Sasuke and Tachibana launched easily found their marks. But most shinobi easily deflected them. What they didn't realize, however, was that Sasuke had planned a trap for them since he hadn't thrown normal shuriken by wire shuriken that were embedded into the thick trees around them, creating a tight web of wires that would have sliced through any unaware shinobi. Careful, one of the shinobi shouted to warn the others, but Tachibana didn't give them any time. B B B B B B boom M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M. 3 explosive tags melded together to cause a medium-scale explosion that sent blazing hot fire all around the forest, causing most shinobi to cover their eyes to shield themselves, except they ended up running right into the razor-thin wires that Sasuke had planted. With the shinobi entangled, Naruto and Sakura took the baton and entered the battlefield. Naruto with his typical multi-shadow clone jutsu while Sakura used kunai laced with poison. Sakura rushed around the trees to claim the lives of the shinobi that Sasuke had trapped, while Naruto used his clones to provide Sakura a buffer by taking the aggro from all the other shinobi around them. The unit that had appeared in their range suddenly broke into a chaotic spin because of the several Naruto clones that attacked them from all directions. But this didn't last long, since 3 shinobi quickly adapted to the situation as they performed hand seals and caused lightning coats to appear on their bodies. Before anyone could recognize what was happening, the 3 shinobi quickly vanished from their spots and reappeared a few meters away before all the Naruto clones suddenly blew up into a puff of smoke. However, that wasn't where things ended. As soon as the large number of clones disintegrated, a sudden large wall of wind broke through from Naruto's mouth. Wind release. Great breakthrough. Sasuke, not being one to lag behind, added onto the jutsu, skillfully using his Sharingan to study how the jutsu Naruto had made was released. Fire release. Multi-great fireball technique. A storm of fireballs escaped Sasuke's mouth as they mixed with Naruto's great breakthrough jutsu and evolved into a massive, terrifying hurricane of fire that spun at crazy speeds to trash through the line and formations of the shinobi team that had attacked them. What was worse for them was, as soon as the fire reached them, Tachibana quickly used it as cover and began teleporting around at a rapid pace as he sliced the necks of any shinobi in his range. Yet the snowballing fight didn't remain one-sided for long. With quick and nimble finger dances, the same three shinobi from before formed new hand seals and released a new technique. Lightning Release. Great Panther Annihilation. Three gigantic, 8 feet tall panthers made up of lightning emerged as it separated from the lightning cloaks of those shinobi, rushing straight ahead towards Naruto. Sasuke and Sakura, who were caught off guard behind the panthers, easily broke through the firewall they had so tirelessly created. Tachibana was still under everyone's radar and he paused behind a tree to think of a plan to take advantage of this situation in some way. There's no chance of our deaths since there are too many skilled Jonin on our side. But none of them are making a move. Tachibana scanned around and noticed that Tsunade looked the coolest of them all. She was carefully watching all the battles that were happening everywhere, analyzing our strengths and weaknesses. She's also noticed that I'm hanging around and killing people silently. Tachibana observed the Jonin for a few moments before he redirected his efforts to the root shinobi mixed in with the shinobi from Kumo. Those three using varying lightning jutsus look like Jonin on their teams. Can I catch them off guard? Possible if I distract them in some way. But then if I want to catch them off guard I can't reveal myself by helping Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura. Well, I could go in for the kill as soon as the Jonin let their guards down and try to finish them off once they collapse in shock due to the attack. Not having more time to think about the issue, Tachibana was forced to stick to his new plan. He winced slightly when he saw all three of his friends collapse in shock after colliding with the lightning panthers. Of course, they didn't stand stupidly and let the panthers attack them. Naruto used clones to kick himself away, but the panthers were faster and much more agile. Sasuke launched a hurried great fireball to buy himself enough time to slice through the electric panther, but he was too hurried, which led to the panther simply breaking through his fireball. Sakura on the other hand launched several explosive shuriken which destroyed her panther's back legs, but before she could fully extricate herself from the situation, the panther jumped onto her and sunk its electric fangs right into her shoulder, delivering her a shock more devastating than her other two teammates. With the three genin knocked out for the next few seconds, Tachibana turned tense as he waited for the Jonin to come to finish his friends off. Except to his shock and utmost horror, they didn't even move from their spots immediately. They each made silent conversation as one of them split off to go finish the trio of genin while the other two remained in their spot. It was glaringly obvious to Tachibana that the three Jonin had already noticed his presence on the battlefield. Either from judging the bodies of the shinobi that he'd assassinated or simply from noticing something else that Tachibana had missed. But it was a fact that they had noticed him. So they sent one of them while keeping watch with the other two. Tachibana thought in confusion. Why would they do that? If they knew that I existed they could have simply walked to them while pretending like they hadn't noticed me and then simply countered when I did attack. Tachibana realized what had happened belatedly. But it was too late for him. Before he could blink again, 2-3 stakes had already pierced the two Jonin held behind while Shizune had struck out the one that had moved to kill the unconscious genin. Seems like you realized where you went wrong, Tsunade said from beside Tachibana. He had absolutely no clue when she'd gotten beside him, but Tachibana nodded. I wanted to use them as bait, but they already knew I existed. But when I realized that they knew I should have pressed for advantage because they didn't know if I was a genin or jonin. But since I didn't attack immediately they figured out that I lacked experience and hence couldn't be a jonin. So they figured out that I was a chunin at most. Tsunade said nothing else, her brows furrowed as if she was thinking deeply about something, but then she sighed. You're a good shinbi, just not a good teammate. Maybe you just lack experience being either. Tachibana felt annoyed at being given what he felt was an unfair evaluation, but he didn't argue further. Tsunade already knocked out the rest of the shinobi and so he was tasked with tying them all up for Inoichi to interrogate. The process was slow since Inoichi couldn't gain any important information from the genin who he could easily read through, but reading the jonins was difficult and so it took time since he had to weaken them through torture first. Tachibana looked at the first round of torture and walked away after it made him a little queasy. There was no blood. It didn't even look like there was pain. But by the time Inoichi was done, the shinobi looked more like meat bags without a soul than anything else. So, Tsunade asked, I don't think I can become a Yamanaka. Tachibana answered truthfully, I'm asking you about our earlier conversation. Huh? Tachibana looked confused. Tsunade gave him an annoyed look before spelling it out clearly. How do you contact that god of yours? Oh. A smile immediately returned to Tachibana's face as he quickly explained. Tsunade knelt on the forest floor in front of a makeshift altar that Yamato had created. He'd also created special candles for her to use. Shizune stood on the side looking a little worried while Yamato looked at Tsunade with admiration. Tsunade-sama, what if something goes wrong? Shizune asked softly. Don't worry about it. If it does, well, you'll just have to save me with all that medical knowledge I stuffed into you all this time. Shizune nodded with a firm gaze as both she and Yamato stepped away, moving to Loki, who was keeping watch over the shinobi they'd captured with Inoichi. Shizune wanted to ask Tachibana a question, but Yamato stopped her with his eyes and shook his head. When will they wake up Inoichi-san? Tachibana asked. You should have saved them if you were so worried, Inoichi said with a deadpan expression as he watched Tachibana stick a random branch into Sasuke's nostrils and widen it to make him seem like a pig. Don't tell me you don't like this. Your daughter loses her mind when she sees him. Inoichi's eyes suddenly narrowed as he whispered after leaning in closer. Should I go in there and torture him a little? Tachibana gave him a confused glance before speaking. Why would you do that? Wouldn't it be better to use this opportunity to change his personality and make him love boys instead of girls? I mean, I heard that he even kissed Naruto before. So it won't be that unbelievable. Is that so? Inoichi looked at Sasuke and Naruto with a scheming glare. Naruto looked like he shivered instinctively. We're right here, you know, Yamato said faintly as he spotted Inoichi inching closer to Sasuke and Naruto. Tisk. Silence settled in for a while before Tachibana broke it once again. What will we do now that we have the enemy plans? It's Shikaku's turn to respond, Inoichi said with confidence. But can we really do anything else? I'm sure the enemy probably knows that we have their plans once they fail to establish a connection with this team, and didn't you say that we were going to be surrounded eventually by 7 more teams? That Kumo is also sending Killer Bee. That guy has the same bounty as Tsunade-sama in the bingo book, you know. Isn't running away the best option? Even though Tachibana had just suggested desertion, no one complained about it. But they were silent because they too wondered if Tsunade could win against a perfect Jinchuriki, of the 8-tailed beast no less. The 9 tails was a fresh experience in Inoichi's mind, while Yamato could easily sense exactly how terrible the chakra of the 9 tails leaking out of Naruto was. Shizune wondered if Katsuyu would be able to help even a little in case such a fight did happen. Soon, however, Tachibana heard ravings and whispers in his mind. The fool that does not belong to this world. The mysterious ruler of the Forgotten Lands. The researcher who aims to deliver salvation. Tachibana couldn't hear the contents of the prayer beyond his honorific name, but because he didn't have the privacy to enter the Sapphira Castle, he decided a reply to Tsunade would have to wait. He couldn't seem too desperate anyway. Wait. Why does it seem like I'm trying to woo Tsunade? Been a long time since I wrote this. I don't even remember half the plot lines I had planned. The characters might feel inconsistent. I hope you still enjoy reading though. Let me know if you spot any discrepancies. Tsunade returned just as Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura woke up, each of them feeling ashamed to have fallen unconscious in front of someone as great as Tsunade. Naruto was just embarrassed that he wasn't able to protect Sakura. Any plans? Tsunade asked Inoichi, assuming that he had stayed in contact with Shikaku. Tachibana hoped for a retreat order, but his mouth fell open. Yes, Tsunade-sama, Inoichi said, and once he got a nod from Tsunade, he continued, we were asked to set up a forward operating base camp for the reinforcements to arrive at so that they can secure the front line. Tachibana wanted to curse, but mindful of Tsunade, he simply maintained an annoyed look which stopped when Yamato slapped the back of his head. Tsunade kept her eyes closed as she contemplated what they would do next. Inoichi, stay behind, you're not needed anymore for now since we're too close to the front lines. You may return when Anbu takes back the captured shinobi. Good work. Inoichi nodded quickly, understanding that his best use would be back at the base camp where he could direct the other Yamanaka. And just like that, Tsunade, Shizune and the rest of Team 7 were on their journey towards their borders once again. As they journeyed, however, Tachibana moved closer to Tsunade and asked her a question. Why are we moving the war front closer to Kumo? Shouldn't we camp for them inside our territory? We could slow them down with spread out teams and ambush them using guerrilla warfare to keep them on their toes until they come face to face with our front line. Tsunade sent a short glance Tachibana's way while the Guinan paid close attention too, since he seemed to make sense. It isn't that simple. First of all, it is very hard to communicate with each other like that. How will you know which of those smaller teams fighting in the forests to tire the Kumo shinobi won their fights and which died? You can't have precious Yamanaka on the front lines, can you? Tachibana nodded but then asked another question. You said first of all, so there are other reasons. Tsunade sent another glance his way, this time longer before she looked back ahead. Yes. If we're just that much stronger, why do we need to play coy? Konoha hasn't survived for so long while hiding behind trees. Tachibana looked annoyed. If Kumo is being so aggressive, they obviously have something planned, right? Isn't this us being too hard-headed? And for the first time ever since Tachibana had seen Tsunade, she chuckled as if she'd heard a funny joke. How silly. Who taught you in the academy? Did you pass with the worst written test scores? Tachibana didn't want to disrespect Maruboshi's name, so he simply said, I wasn't taught in the academy, I became a shinobi only a few months ago. Ho! Tsunade said softly as she scanned Tachibana once again. Is that so? So, why are we being so hard-headed? It wasn't Tsunade who responded this time but Yamato instead. Because we more or less know what they have in store for us. Ah, you mean spies? Tachibana suddenly understood. Yamato simply nodded but Tachibana suddenly asked an even stranger question. That makes things easier. If that's the case, why don't we simply not fight them? Isn't that better? 0 casualties. Everyone frowned but Tachibana continued. I mean, hear me out, if we know what Kumo has prepared for us with relative certainty, and since we only need to establish a front line, why don't we just prepare a simple fort? Seeing everyone still frowning, Tachibana explained in more detail. Naruto-kun here can make more than a few hundred clones without tiring himself out. Why don't we simply make a fort using Yamato-sensei's wood-release technique and leave Naruto to man it using shadow clone and transformation jutsu while we lay hidden to attack at any shinobi that dare to come close? Isn't that just attacking with extra steps? Naruto asked, confused since he couldn't understand what was going on but everyone else seemed like they had an epiphany. It serves 2 purposes. Tachibana patiently explained to Naruto. The fort signifies to them that we have already arrived with an army to the border. Which will make them reluctant to attack us with smaller teams like the ones we just defeated. And killing any teams they send to scout the fortress will give them the idea that it is well protected. Oh. Naruto nodded sagely. But Tsunade shook her head. No. We're going to follow what Shikaku said. Tachibana frowned but then he shook his head. They probably know this stuff better. Meanwhile, at Konoha, Shikaku looked at the giant map spread around on his table with several troops spread around with a frown. He moved around several troops on the map, trying to concentrate it around a single pawn, but each time he did he faced several problems. Either the battlefront from where Kiri would be arriving in their ships would fall weak, or the other fronts from where Kumo was attacking would be spread too thin. Eventually, Shikaku simply looked at the pawn standing alone at the border with a slight frown. Tsunade-sama and Team 7 will have to suffer quite a bit. Was sending Naruto to face the 8 tails the right move though? Maybe he'll learn something from the killer bee. Single quote. I hope Tsunade-sama is able to hold off killer bee so that Yamato can seal away the eight-tailed beast so that Kumo loses their Jinchuriki. I hope nothing goes wrong. Should I send reinforcements after all? How troublesome. Some distance away. Danzo-sama, the root shinobi that were sent to the west as part of the advance infiltration force unit were killed. The Shokaichu that returned from the scene informed us that a blonde woman with vibrant chakra along with another man with vibrant chakra was spotted at the scene. Danzo smiled as he noticed this. Tell Suna to send their Jinchuriki to that location. Inform Kumo that he will be coming. The shinobi who was talking to Danzo froze when he heard the order but then without delay nodded and walked away from the place, aiming to deliver the order to the right people through the correct channels. Stepping out of the shadows was Hiruzen, who revealed himself after the shinobi had left. How long will you keep hiding, Sarutobi? Danzo asked without even looking at Hiruzen, who was missing an arm, just like him. Orochimaru will not hesitate to kill me as long as he sees me. I can't go anyplace else. Too bad, I can only hide in your shadows. But haven't I hidden you in mine for so long? Orochimaru will know of your location eventually. Yes, he will, won't he? Perhaps your time has come. Don't you want to go out as an honorable shinobi? Or has the reality of having to face your disciple in battle forced you to become a coward? Tsunade doesn't deserve to die after all we've done. HMPF. All we did was for Konoha. Tachibana lightened his footsteps by cushioning them with chakra, as did Yamato along with the rest of Team 7 as Tsunade extended her hand and signaled all of them to slow down and come to a silent stop. Tachibana activated his spirit vision and looked around. There was a small team moving closer to them consisting of only 3 people, which confused him all the more. Why did we stop? Fortunately, he didn't have to wait longer as he heard Tsunade explain. Yamato, take everyone on Team 7, apart from this brat, ahead. Kill anyone you encounter. Yamato nodded without question and simply indicated that Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura follow him. They all gave Tachibana a confused glance at which he simply shrugged before following Yamato away. Are we going to flank the enemy? Tachibana asked, attempting to make an intelligent guess. Tsunade nodded, yes. I don't want to waste my strength before fighting the 8 tails. But why did you separate me? Tachibana asked. But Tsunade didn't respond. She just looked at Tachibana for a few seconds before shaking her head as they continued their journey, taking a different route so that they could flank whoever Yamato encountered. But Tachibana could swear he heard Suon say, "Troublesome stinky brat." Shizune seemed to have heard it too, since she almost fumbled and bashed her head straight into a tree. Tachibana, confused, smelt himself and became even more confused. Do I stink so bad that people will detect us from a mile away? Single quote. I mean, I didn't take a shower before we left since it was so sudden, but do I really stink that much? It wasn't very difficult to take out the team that was scouting for information nearby. Yamato surprised them first with his wood-release jutsus, but Tsunade rushing out to explode all the enemies' heads like watermelons under a hydraulic press, which didn't even give them the time to react in any way, was the killing blow. However, it did spray Tsunade in a shower of blood and gray matter. She isn't terrified of blood anymore. Tachibana thought as he studied Tsunade while she led them with blood still dripping from her fists. What is she even thinking? Tachibana wondered as he saw Tsunade's eyes focus ahead with concentration. Tachibana's wondering didn't last long, however, since, "Something on my face, kid?" Tsunade asked without looking over, causing him to feel a little embarrassed and quickly shake his head with a soft response, "No." Tsunade barely glanced in Tachibana's direction and refocused on the path ahead of them as her mind started to swim through different questions. Single quote. Katsuyu said that the boy was going to be important. Should I not send him to the front lines then? Taking him out wouldn't be much different for anyone. In fact, a hastily trained genin like him would only be a weight on the teams that'll arrive sooner or later. I could have him pulled under the pretext of giving him a job to plan different strategies for us to handle the incoming attack since he has a decent mind. But this kid, Tachibana's figure lined up with Orochimaru's in Tsunade's mind. They aren't very different at all. He has the same boxy vibe around him that keeps him sticking out like a nail in his own team. He doesn't trust his teammates with his back and neither does he trust his sensei. He can work together with them. But work along with them. He doesn't know the starting of how to trust someone else. His fights are carefully planned to keep him as safe as possible while aiming for completing his objective as fast as possible. At first glance, it all seems nice since this is how a good shinobi should aim to be, putting his mission above everything else, but the boy is much more ruthless. His aim isn't the mission assigned to him, it's himself, like Orochimaru. The boy's shrewd and selfish. Sigh. What Shikaku thought about sending the boy here I don't know. Did he even think about any of this? He probably did. It'll be troublesome to keep him around. Using him like a tool would be the best. I'm sure he'll catch on to me eventually, but it shouldn't make any difference to him. He'll probably appreciate someone communicating with him in such clear terms. I should keep him away from Team 7. He isn't a good influence on Kushina's son or on his team. They might not know it, but the boy will likely abandon them at the drop of a hat. I doubt he has any loyalty towards the village too. If so, what is his aim here? Why did he leave his rich and fabulous life as a prince in the daimyo's castle? He enjoys killing. No, he doesn't seem the type. The thrill of a fight. No, his idea from before was to avoid direct fights. He doesn't like fighting unnecessarily. Is it something strange like Orochimaru? To learn the secrets of Charka? Or does it have to do with that god of his? He does seem like a devout believer with how much he praises him every opportunity he sees fit. Stinky brat with too many problems. Tsunade's eyes softened at that point as a strange thought reached her mind. Sigh. Would Nawaki have survived had he been more like this boy? I asked Orochimaru to teach him thinking he was too naive. Perhaps some of that sharp and keen selfish mind of his sensei's would rub off on him, but it didn't. Now that I think about it, Kushina's child is much like him. Sigh. I'm getting old. Tsunade then looked at Tachibana and suddenly felt annoyed. I have a bad feeling about the kid. Should I just kill? Tachibana felt someone staring at him with malice which frightened him since it felt very close to killing intent. As such, Tachibana moved closer to Tsunade, wondering if their enemies had already arrived or if he was hallucinating. Tsunade's hand moved secretly towards Tachibana's throat, but her fingers froze before she could do anything. Tsunade's head flicked ahead as her eyes scanned her surroundings before she forcibly pulled Tachibana's collar and threw him backwards at Shizune. Before Tsunade could do anything else, the space around her exploded with light. Yamato, who was a little ahead, moving along with Team 7, froze and suddenly slapped his hand on the tree he was standing on to cause it to overgrow into a dome around the entirety of Team 7. And since the genin were all rushing through the trees, they slammed themselves hard against the walls confining them. Shizune herself almost immediately used Shunshin to drag Tachibana away with her. Tachibana, who was being manhandled, looked with wide eyes as a sudden B B B B B B boom M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M M rang out in front of him. Shizune had grabbed him and hidden behind the trunk of a thick tree along with him as he watched waves of hot air singe the grass around them, setting entire bushes aflame as an explosive heatwave rushed outwards from the area he was just standing in. Wah! Tachibana's head had stopped working before restarting with a solution. He just couldn't bring himself to believe that what he had just seen was real. Nobody said they could do this in the anime. If Kumo could do this, why didn't they just bomb the Hokage office directly like this? It had taken a few seconds to process, but Tachibana understood what had happened. Kumo had used their heavenly transfer technique to transport a large ball of explosive tags right in between their formation, right beside Tsunade. The ball was already lit on fire and nearly halfway done through its fuse, making it impossible to defuse it. How Kumo knew about their position and exact coordinates? Tachibana didn't know, but he had a few guesses. Perhaps some Rouge Aburame or some other shinobi like Sai in Danzo's little gang worked to inform Kumo using methods they weren't trained to notice. Tachibana's eyes flicked around as he scanned for Tsunade and he spotted her body split in half. Bleeding out. She was dying. A shiver ran down Tachibana's spine. But even then that wasn't what mattered since there was an even bigger explosive problem in his face right now. Literally. Large pillars of light erupted all around the forest and once they vanished all that remained floating in the air were balls of explosive tags of a similar size as before and they were already burning. Kumo had teleported approximately 30 bombs of the same type that he had just seen. It was impossible to defuse them with any method Tachibana knew. Moments passed by as Tachibana's eyes trembled with shock and nervousness. The bombs were all ready to release everything contained in them. We're going to die. We're all going to die. Single quote ... I'm going to die. It wasn't the first time Tachibana had found himself in a life-threatening situation in this world. Yet seeing Tsunade dead was enough to shut Tachibana's mind down for a few seconds longer. Seconds in which the bombs burned further. Maybe Naruto can survive. Maybe he'll take revenge for all of us. Single quote ... I'll be dead. Tachibana's fingers clenched around the bark of the tree trunk they were hiding behind. His strength was enough to make the hard trunk of the long-lived tree groan under pressure. Shizune was still calm but Tachibana didn't know how long she would remain that way. Time ticked in moments, each moment dragging into eternity as Tachibana's brain started to pick up speed. I can't die yet. And before he knew it, Tachibana was already moving. Not through space in the traditional sense by walking or even running. No. Tachibana teleported right into the heart of it all. Tachibana teleported to the closest bomb that was about to explode. And before anyone realized what happened, Tachibana launched the bomb towards the sky before teleporting away once again. One down. With just the first teleportation, Tachibana discovered that this method that had popped up in his head was meaningless. He could definitely teleport to 1, 2 or even 5 more explosive tag grenades. But what then? What about the remaining 20 or so? Each time he teleported the remaining balls would burn further, and he knew he wasn't fast enough to make it to all of them in time. Tachibana's fingers clenched tight. His eyes scanned around as a general overview of the situation as a mental image of his surroundings formed in his mind. Tachibana blinked for a moment but he was already moving. Emerging out of the flames of another giant explosive tags grenade, Tachibana launched several kunai from his fingers. Each kunai stabbed into a different explosive grenade. Tachibana's shuriken and kunai skills were pretty impressive given his clown skills, but he still only had 10 fingers, meaning he could at most release 8 kunai at once. But that was enough. It had to be enough since that was the absolute best he could pull off right now. Even though lacking in numbers, the kunai themselves were special. Almost as soon as Tachibana launched the kunai in different directions, he kicked the explosive grenade closest to him into the sky. It wasn't much but Tachibana managed to create a safe space in the minefield that the Kumo shinobi had laid out. 8 explosive grenades shot towards the sky following the one Tachibana had kicked because all the kunai were connected to the one he kicked using metallic wires. It wasn't much, but it did create a small region in the entire blast zone that could be used to buffer through the ensuing explosions with a proper buffer. Tachibana fell to the ground and almost instantly looked up with worry. He didn't know any convenient shielding jutsu to save himself. Except Shizune wasn't like him. As Shizune realized what Tachibana was doing, she'd already primed her chakra to create a water shield. As soon as Tachibana landed on the ground, Shizune shunshined to his location before spitting out a flood of water which collected around the two of them in a large thick dome. The explosion was loud and blinding. Tachibana was forced to close his eyes and cower to the ground by making sure to cover his exposed skin, since even through the water shield that Shizune set up he felt a searing heatwave pass over him as his skin turned to a deep shade of red to indicate he was being cooked. Even in the midst of being cooked alive, Tachibana had several questions. What's the use of stopping this one bombardment? They could just keep doing it again and again until we finally died. What about the other fronts? Are they facing the same bombardment? If they did, the war's as good as finished. I doubt Konoha will have much longer after this. Tachibana's muscles tightened when he realized this. His mind was already spinning in circles about his next actions, but they were all held back when he realized that he might not make it out of this situation alive. It felt tortuous and unending. Why didn't I just divine about all this beforehand? I had the perfect ability to counter all this. I could have simply divined about it and warned everyone about it. God damn it. Tachibana didn't even realize that the explosions had died. His ears rang so loudly that he couldn't hear much of anything other than his own thoughts. It was a miracle that he even felt Shizune tug on his shoulder when she did, since his skin had long lost any sense of touch because of the blinding pain that had numbed it because it was cooked so thoroughly. Tachibana got up from his crouching position and looked at Shizune, who was similarly cooked, but her wounds seemed to be healing quickly since she was using what Tachibana assumed to be the mystical palm technique. No more explosions? Tachibana asked Shizune as she shook her head. Tachibana breathed out a sigh of relief that he hadn't realized he was holding. He didn't know exactly why Kumo stopped bombarding the place. Perhaps it was because Mabui, the woman who knew this technique, didn't have enough chakra to do it again, for now. Or maybe the world had corrected itself and given her a sudden heart attack because she tried to kill Ninja Jesus Naruto. That would be for the best. But Shizune's mystical palm technique suddenly reminded him of someone. Tsunade. Tachibana's eyes widened as he quickly activated his spirit vision and found Tsunade some distance away from them all. Shizune's eyes widened too, and when she saw Tachibana rushing in a particular direction, she rushed with him too. Is she still alive? Tachibana thought, since he could see that her spirit body was still there in both her legs and torso. Perhaps she used the 100 healing seal to save herself. She did something similar when Madara ripped her apart. She can still save. Tachibana's steps slowed as he reached closer to Tsunade until he eventually stopped. Tsunade's eyes were unfocused, staring at the canopy or the light that came from beyond it. The scene would have seemed serene if not for all the smoke in the air from the burning trees and bushes. Even more if the puddle of red under Tsunade's body vanished without trace. Shizune rushed past him shouting something, but Tachibana's ringing ears couldn't quite capture what she said. He did see Shizune collapse on her knees beside Tsunade and begin crying though. Yamato rushed in after her, trying to use rudimentary healing techniques he knew, but Tsunade simply stopped them from wasting their efforts with a shake of her head. Naruto, Sakura and Sasuke all looked traumatized. Tachibana's ringing ears slowly cleared up, at least enough to hear what Tsunade was whispering after he tried hard to read her lips. I'm sorry. I will not be able to go on any longer. No, Tsunade-sama. I can do it. We can do it. We can heal you. Please summon Katsuyu-sama. Shizune practically screamed. Tsunade's lips grew into a vague smile. I could have saved myself had I activated the seal of 100 healings. Tachibana knew what it meant. He was directly responsible for Tsunade's death. Had he not been so close beside her, Tsunade could have focused on herself and at least activated the seal of 100 healings, or just escaped from the area to save herself. A strange sense of anger rose in Tachibana's heart. He didn't really understand it. He didn't understand why he was angry with himself and most importantly with Tsunade. It felt harsh and unreasonable, but he did feel that way. Tsunade continued to speak regardless. I've planted a seal in the area so that there can be no space interference for now. I planted the seals on these small shogi for each one of you so that you don't cough. Shizune quickly wiped her tears and started using the mystical palm on Tsunade's lungs, trying to keep her blood from filling them up and drowning her. Tsunade smiled but continued speaking. As I was saying, each of you can take one piece seal so that a small area around you can't be interfered with. It'll give you enough time to run away if something like it happens again. Tsunade then turned towards Yamato. Shizune will guide you to my sealing notes once you have time to return to Konoha. Yamato's eyes firmed and he nodded. Tsunade's eyes then moved towards the genin. You're the last Uchiha left. The Senju clan were sworn enemies of the Uchiha at one point. So we have several ways the Uchiha used the Sharingan and even some common counters to them. Sasuke gulped. He wasn't particularly close with Tsunade and had only heard about her through her legends. It had set her up to be at an almost unreachable stage in his mind. But seeing her like this shattered something within him. In the end, he couldn't understand how to feel, so he simply nodded. Tsunade then turned to Sakura. You have decent chakra control. It would be nice if you could become a medical shinobi. Ask Shizune to train you if you think it is something you might want to pursue. Sakura nodded, her hands clamping around her mouth to prevent any sounds from escaping her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. Tsunade was the role model for several kunoichi growing up after all. Tsunade finally turned towards Naruto. You can have this, it's my grandfather's. You do know who Hashirama was, right? Tsunade asked with a humorous undertone. It seemed even she had realized just how dumb Naruto was in the short duration of their trip. Naruto wanted to complain about it, of course, he knew Hashirama. His face was on the goddamn Hokage rock. It was a face he used to paint often. But he just couldn't bring the words to put his stance in front of the dying Tsunade. So he just nodded and caught the crystal necklace Tsunade tossed in his direction while trying hard not to tear up at the fact that the first thing he received from someone in the form of a gift was someone dying. I hope you become someone as great as them, maybe even become the Hokage, but I fear for Konoha if you do. Naruto's sorrow-filled face scrunched up and he barely managed to hold himself back from cursing at Tsunade when Yamato held his shoulder. Tsunade only smiled lightly as her eyes finally stopped on Tachibana, who was still looking at her with shock. Give us some time alone. Tsunade said, causing everyone to freeze for a moment. Tsunade-sama. Shizune shouted, feeling outraged. She wanted to spend every last moment with who she had come to think of as her mother. But Tsunade only smiled when she looked at her, not going to let this old lady do what she wants even on her deathbed. Shizune. I'm not gambling, am I? Shizune's tears started to leak from her eyes as she forced eye contact with Tsunade for a few seconds. She quickly sniffled away her pain as she nodded before using the mystic palm with a significant amount of chakra for a few seconds to expand Tsunade's life for a few seconds more before she stood up and left. Everyone else looked at Tachibana and then at Tsunade before they too followed Shizune without a word of protest. Why don't you come closer? It's getting harder to speak when you're so far, Tsunade whispered in pain. Tachibana's legs carried him to Tsunade before he collapsed beside her. There was silence for a few seconds before he opened his mouth again. Why? Tsunade looked at Tachibana for a few seconds before speaking with a smile. It wasn't your fault. I would have had to put up the seal to stop anyone from interfering with the space around us regardless. Tachibana fell silent again. Tsunade didn't need words to see that Tachibana wasn't convinced. After all, if a person wanted to blame themselves for something, they didn't need to be fully logical. But Tachibana wasn't very wrong in his thought process too. If Tsunade hadn't had to waste time getting him to safety, she could have directly started with applying the seal so that only a few of the explosive tag grenades could have made it to this side. That would have made it much easier for them to manage, and Tsunade could have lived even if she might have been cooked for a few seconds. As such, Tachibana asked her another question. Aren't you afraid of death? Are you? Tsunade asked with a warm smile. Tachibana didn't respond, but his eyes were clear. He was deathly afraid of death. Dying once had sent him to this hellish place. He didn't want to know what would happen if it happened another time. Tsunade's eyes started to go out of focus as she looked back up at the burning canopy above them. I don't know what happens after death, maybe we get erased. In that case, I wouldn't even know anything, so it doesn't bother me. Perhaps I'll go to Pure Land because I helped spread the glory of Konoha, but given what I've learned recently, perhaps I have a special spot reserved for me in hell. Who knows? Tsunade's eyes landed back on Tachibana. Tell me, what do you think of my village? It isn't a very nice place, but it is, sort of, a home, to me, and to the several people that live within its confines. Tachibana responded with clear hesitation. Yet when Tsunade looked into Tachibana's eyes, scanning for any signs of lies or deceit, but she could find none. I see, Tsunade said, a smile forming on her face. What's the deal with that god of yours? Could you ask him to give me access to booze and gambling on the other side? Tachibana kept looking at Tsunade with a blank expression which extended the silence after her words into an awkward stretch. Tsunade almost laughed, but with her body being held together by chakra duct tape she controlled herself. Fine, humor this is my dying wish, Tsunade said and looked right into Tachibana's eyes with a focused gaze. What is your aim? Tachibana's hands trembled a little, as he mumbled. Like grandmother, like daughter, why are the two of you so sharp? Tsunade's eyes narrowed, as she asked, what do you mean? Tachibana only shook his head. You'll find out soon enough. And as for my aim, well, I saw my own death in the future, I'm just trying to avoid that particular future. Tsunade's eyes remained narrowed as she looked at Tachibana with confusion, but eventually, with her time quickly running out, she was forced to put aside her grievances at his short answer. So you're just afraid of death? Suan joked, coughing up another mouthful of blood as she did. Tachibana opened his mouth to speak. I just want to die when I want to die, and not by accident. For the first time, Tsunade laughed as if Tachibana had told her a funny joke. But it quickly devolved into her coughing up more blood. Eventually, when she calmed herself down. Are you serious? Do you not see what happened to me? I'm arguably among one of the strongest shinobi in the world and I'm dying, so unexpectedly even after knowing how to heal myself within moments. Tachibana was quick to argue. That's only because you sacrificed your life. If you weren't such a person, wouldn't you have survived this attack? You just threw away your life. It's almost like you wanted to die. Tsunade looked at Tachibana with a smile and then, as if explaining to a child, she spoke in a soothing tone. There are two ways to get stronger. You either take the help of everyone around you, or you step on their toes to get what you want. Either way you'll be making bonds with others that will drag you down eventually, bonds of either trust which will require you to sacrifice yourself, or bonds of hatred which will cause people to hunt you down. Tachibana's lips curved into a frustrated frown. It won't matter if I'm just that much stronger than all of them though. But haven't you already seen your end? That there's someone stronger than you. Someone who can kill you irrespective of your methods. And doesn't the argument make sense the other way too? Why do you need to worry about your bonds dragging you down if you're strong enough to carry them all? Tachibana was silenced. With a smile, Tsunade spoke calmly. Well, I don't need to give you such lengthy lectures. I'm sure you'll experience at least a single war in your entire lifetime. You'll see then that it takes more than just a few bonds to survive a war. Without people just as crazy as you, you'll find yourself succumbing to the madness of it all sooner rather than later. Tachibana remained silent as he contemplated on Tsunade's words. It wasn't a mistake to say that Beyonders needed genuine bonds with the people around them to maintain their humanity as they went higher in sequence. Bonds with people would become anchors for their sanity. But at the same time, trusting someone else in this world with his secrets of being a Beyonder. Tachibana found that tantamount to suicide. Especially when Tachibana didn't have to deal with losing his humanity to madness in the first place, since he wasn't in the world of Lord of the Mysteries and there was no remnant will in his potions to drive him insane. But that was when another thought struck him because of Tsunade's words. Am I still becoming more inhumane? It wasn't a philosophical question. Tachibana was wondering if he was becoming someone who would happily discard everything he currently had in hopes of some elusive title like becoming the strongest in the world or something. Since the end of such a path was clear to him even without much mental stimulation. It was one where he would be absolutely alone at the peak with no one to share his strength with. Although he didn't have first-hand experience of what it was like in such a position, Tachibana knew well that he wouldn't be able to handle such loneliness. Don't I already have Grandma Mito? She knows pretty much everything there is to know about me beyond me being a Beander. I'm sure she has her guesses regarding that too. But Tachibana knew well that it would be hard to call someone like Mito his friend. Tachibana clenched and unclenched his hands several times in frustration. Why did I even come into this world? Couldn't I have enjoyed my absolutely normal life with my actual friends? We could have played every stupid game released. Seeing each other rage like idiots because of some silly game where you climbed mountains of trash with a hammer while inside a pot. But as if knowing what Tachibana was thinking about, Tsunade simply grabbed his fingers and gently stroked the back of his hand with her thumb as if she were soothing his frustrations. Everyone has secrets, like I've never told anyone that I developed a fondness for Jiraiya at some point in the last decade. Tachibana's eyes widened, but Tsunade simply continued. Secrets aren't something that decide how close you are to someone else. What does is how willing the two of you are to turn foolish for each other. There was a silent pause before Tsunade spoke again. I gave everyone else something to help strengthen them, why don't I do the same for you? Tachibana's frown deepened. All of a sudden he felt an inkling of danger. I have a simple way for you to become stronger. I want you to confess to every girl you meet from now on. Tsunade said with a funny smile which caused veins on Tachibana's head to throb. But before he could retort, she continued speaking. I don't care if you do it thinking that you have some grand plan which you are enacting on to manipulate your girlfriends, so that you can sacrifice them at the right time to save yourself. Tsunade's crude plan left Tachibana feeling weirded out. Although he was someone who would always think of how his actions would benefit him, not even he was cruel enough to forge fake relationships with people just to manipulate them in the end. He didn't even know if he could do such a thing without feeling absolutely terrible about it afterwards. Why? Tachibana asked with a confused expression, since he couldn't see how that would make him stronger. Tsunade looked at Tachibana with a silly smile. With blood trailing from the edge of her lips, she looked like a vampire, but Tachibana said nothing, not like he could have even said that without explaining to Tsunade what a vampire actually was. Finally, Tsunade spoke again after battling through immense pain in her flickering consciousness. It's because you're too stuck up in your thoughts. You feel as if the world around you is not the one you belong to. You have this boxy aura around yourself that keeps people from truly learning about you. Almost as if you're afraid of being hurt again. Tachibana's eyes trembled. It was an accurate assessment of his situation. But Tsunade's eyes were already looking somewhere beyond him. Tsunade gripped his hand tighter as she continued to speak. As long as you embarrass yourself in front of other people, you'll learn that the world isn't so harsh after all. You just need to give it the time to show its true face to you. Tachibana couldn't understand how Tsunade knew him so well, but his grip on her hands tightened in return, as if he were trying to gain strength from the dying woman in front of him to support himself. It felt silly, but Tsunade's words touched something much deeper within him. He couldn't understand what they changed, but he quickly tried putting some distance between them. He felt threatened simply by being beside her. Except Tsunade didn't let him go. Instead, she spoke softly. My time's here. Tsunade spoke in barely a whisper. She looked at Tachibana one last time and smiled happily. Tell Jiraiya that I really loved him. His books were terrible. I tried reading them and felt the strong urge to skewer whoever wrote them. But in the end, I felt happy that even in a world as dreary as this one, there was something other shinobi could look forward to. And if you ever meet Orochimaru, tell him that I forgive him. Finally, Tsunade looked at Tachibana with a hollow gaze that made him wonder if she could even see anymore as she spoke to him. I hope to see you in Pure Land someday. Tachibana's grip on Tsunade's hand tightened as he felt it becoming heavier with each passing word. And eventually, he was the only one holding hands anymore. Sigh. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.